Hello and welcome into my latest live stream. I am Kerry Holzman, and today I'm going to be telling you about my history in IT. And you know, I'm not going to focus on the good stuff, right? You've all assumed the good stuff. I've shown you the joy of IT. Now I'm going to talk about all the bad stuff. First, make sure everybody can hear me okay. Hello, hello. I'm looking in the chat room. We're live right now. We've got, looks like 144 people tuned in. And some folks have said that I didn't play the intro. How about now? Did that work? No? It's not working? Hold on, I'll play the intro. I gotta figure out which button to press. It's too complicated for my simple brain. It's not working. Why isn't it working? Look at that. I almost got it figured out. There's your intro. All right, so today, today I'm going to talk to you about my history working in IT, and I want to share with you some of the things I wasn't prepared for, I wasn't trained for. Now, you got to remember, this was the 1990s, the early 1990s, and times were a little bit different than they are today. But people, for the most part, are still the same. And so I share these stories with you in the hopes that if you should experience something similar, you won't be so blindsided by it like I was, and perhaps you'll react to it better than I did. One of the first jobs, actually the first job I got in IT, I was really, because of my OCD, I like everything in the right order. I got a job, I knew somebody that worked for a computer company. And I never gave myself enough credit for what I knew. There's always somebody smarter than you, you know? And I always was very humble. By saying humble, it makes you not humble, right? But I didn't give myself enough credit for what I knew. And so I went into this interview at this business. And here in Arizona, people generally don't wear a full suit and a tie. It's very hot in the summer, even the spring and the fall. You know, it's easily, we every year generally have over 100 days of over 100-degree weather in a row. So it's very uncomfortable to wear the traditional suit and tie that you see people wear throughout the business world. And I'm naive, I didn't know that. So I walk into this professional computer business, and I look like I own the place because I'm dressed sharper than anybody else. So that was awkward. But I figured, you know, there's a friend of mine who worked there. He said they were hiring, and I thought, you know, if I could get in doing inventory control, that would be a great foot in the door to move into the computer field. And so I got hired, never wore that suit and tie again, felt like an idiot. And my job was to control and balance the inventory. They had a big problem with missing parts. They were building computers. Now the name of this company, you can Wikipedia a lot of this stuff I'm about to tell you. All these companies are long since gone, filed bankruptcy. And all these companies that I'm going to talk about today treated their employees like crap and treated their customers like crap. And those companies don't exist anymore. And it's basically every single company I ever worked for, I think. I'm certainly only going to mention the bad ones today, but they certainly make up the vast majority of my experience. Now, this company was called Tristar Computer Corporation, and Tristar was building high-end CAD workstations in Chandler, Arizona, which was about a 30-mile drive from my house each way, but totally worth it. I mean, to work for this company was a great honor. I saw it as an honor, and I saw it as an opportunity to do their inventory control. And the way it would work is so that you had a warehouse, and in the warehouse we had something called the cage. And the cage was a chain link fence that went from ground to ceiling, surrounded with a locked gate. And that's where all the RAM and CPUs, I think even the hard drives, anything that was small and expensive that could easily be stolen was kept in the cage. And so what you would do if you worked on the assembly line is you would say, you know, I'm ready for my next build, and they would give you a plastic bucket. I don't know what they call them, like a crate that had the little lid that flipped closed. You get them at the hardware store. And in it would be the motherboard and all the basic essentials, and a piece of paper or papers that had the build configuration for that specific PC. Now in these days we were building 486 computers, and this is before the Pentium. When you needed, for your build on your paperwork, it would say what the RAM, CPU, and hard drive was. You would take that to the cage. You didn't get the parts from the cage. I don't remember where they came from. I think the foreman brought over I can't remember. But you would go over to the cage with your paperwork, and then the person working in the cage would sign off on each item. And then the builder would sign off that they received it for the RAM, hard drive, and CPU. And then you would go off and start building your computer on the assembly line. Generally, the way the assembly line worked is they had this rolling track, and it kind of formed like almost like a big letter U that kind of went off to one side. And then there were benches, and you would put your computer together on the bench, and the only thing that rolling track was used for was to burn in install the software, burn in the computers, and then at the end of the track, that's where they got boxed up and shipped out. The vast majority of computers were sold outside of Arizona. They used to advertise in a very popular computer magazine, which is Computer Shopper. It was eluding me for a moment. And back then, Computer Shopper was about this thick every month when it came out. And that was their primary marketing source. And we built these workstations, these computers they were about this tall. Yeah, about 3 feet, 2.5 feet, 3 feet tall. And I wish I had cameras and pictures like we do today that I could share that with you. I'm sure I could look it up online and find something. But the cover was a big piece of steel in the shape of the case, just like this. And you take the screws out of the end, and you'd have to pull the whole thing back and lift it up. And it was big, and it was heavy, it was steel. And then you had this huge steel tower, not aluminum, this was all steel, big, heavy steel. Power supplies were AT-style power supplies. They were about yay big, and they were heavy. And I used to learn to carry these computers on my hip. I rested on my hip, and this part of my pants would rip and tear over time. I'd have to keep buying new pants because they were heavy. So anyway, so I was working IT. I'm sorry, I was working IT. I was working inventory control, and they decided, the Tristar Corporation decided they were going to open a retail center in a part of the building for local folks who wanted to buy their computers in the retail store, wanted to see, you know, shop. They have a little retail store, and they needed a technician dedicated to the retail store. And that technician's job would be to build the customer's computers solely for the retail store and to support the customers of the retail store. That's that employee's job. So after I had been doing this inventory control for about, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, I don't remember, I said I'd like to apply for the job of the retail store tech. Now at this point, they only know me as an inventory control guy. And they said, well, what makes you think that you're qualified to do that job? And I said, well, I'll be honest with you, I didn't think I knew that much about computers when I started here, but now that I've seen the people that you've hired, I know a lot more than they do. So I'm perfectly suited to this job. And this is my first IT job. And this is the very first event that took place that would lead to many more like it. That's why I think it's important for me to share these stories with you, especially if you're younger, or maybe if you're retired and you think you had it bad. Well, let me tell you about my story. So they said to me, well, here's the problem we have. Nobody has ever controlled our inventory as accurately as you have. So we don't want to give you up out of the inventory control position. And I immediately said, so you want to punish me because I was doing a good job? In other words, if I was doing a terrible job at this, then you would promote me? And they said, well, that's not a very good attitude to have. And I said, well, no, I'm just trying to understand. You're punishing me because I do a good job? And he says, you know what, let me talk it over and we'll get back to you. So I got the job, hallelujah. And it came with a pay raise, which at that time was $1,200 a month. And that was a couple $100 more a month than I was making prior. The problem when you get paid monthly, and this is another lesson you need to be aware of because it still happens today, is you may easily calculate your revenue, your income. I have to slow down now because I'm talking faster than I can come up with the words. When an employer pays you monthly and you're trying to figure out what's my hourly on this, the mistake I made was saying that every month had 4 weeks in it. But every month doesn't have 4 weeks in it. Because if there's 12 months at 4 weeks apiece, that would mean a year only has 48 weeks. We all know a year has 52 weeks. So if you're calculating a month as being 4 weeks long, then you're working for a month for free, or you're not taking that into consideration. So the way I learned how to calculate my salary was to take $1,200 a month times 12 months and divide that by 52. The other thing you could do was divide it by 2,080. 2,080 is the magic number when you talk about working for somebody else. That's 40 hours a week times 52 weeks a year. That works out to 2,080. That's your hourly salary. If you divide 2,080 by your annual salary, that'll give you your hourly salary, right? And I was shocked to find out how little it was. I think it was like $7 or something, 7 and change. It wasn't much. But it was more than I was getting paid in inventory control, so it was a raise for me. But like I say, if a business gives you a raise of 50 cents an hour, just cut that 2,080 in half. That's $1,040 extra a year. That's what that means. If they give you $1 an hour raise, you just made $2,080 more per year. So very easy to calculate everything once you have these basic numbers. None of this, by the way, was taught to me in school. Everything that was supposed to prepare me for a job, no, I was learning about social sciences and history. I was learning about calculus and none of that has ever come into my life. The things that you really need to learn about are things about how to be in a relationship, how to negotiate, and being able to negotiate is a very important skill when you're going to work for somebody else, or even being self-employed. You still have to negotiate. And without any special training towards that, you're going to lose every negotiation you go into, and you're going to not understand why. So there's that. And of course, there's lots of other topics that I think should be taught at schools, from, like I say, relationships, finances, budgeting. Diplomacy should be taught, empathy and diplomacy in a way that you can effectively communicate with others. None of this is taught. So most of us come out of the American school system completely unprepared for work. I remember when I first entered college, the teacher said, one of the first things you're going to learn, this was like on day one, by the way, of my class. He said, the first thing you're going to learn is that when you graduate from college and you get a job, they're going to tell you, don't do anything the way the college told you how to do it, because that's not how we do it. So be prepared for that. So I appreciate that kind of information. So I got this job at Tristar Computer Corporation, 1991. And my job was to build computers that were sold by the salesman in the retail store. The retail store was small. Maybe twice the size, 3 times the size of this kitchen that I'm in. And they had a number of computers on display, and customers would walk in and ask questions. Sometimes, if I was caught up with work, I'd hang out with the salesman. And I remember one time the manager of the retail center was talking to a customer, and I had come out into the showroom. And he said, you know, when you're buying a computer from us, this is our technician. This is Kerry Holzman. He's probably the single best technician in the entire state. And you're not just buying a computer from us. You're buying the technical expertise of one of the best there is. And that comes with your purchase of the computer. And I was blushing. I was like, wow, that's the nicest thing anybody's ever said, you know? Wow. And, you know, I didn't say anything other than, you know, yeah, that's my job, whatever. I'm happy to help. If you need me, I'm here. And then I went and did my thing, whatever I came out to the showroom to do, I got done, went back. So at the end of the day, they're locking up the store. The boss is talking to the other salesman as I enter the room, and he goes, you know, I think Kerry believed all that stuff I told the customer about him. He doesn't understand that I was just trying to sell a computer. I was so deflated. I was so deflated. And it was funny, but I was still like kind of bummed out, you know. I thought he was sincere. So anyway, back in that day, there was no internet, and the way that you had to solve problems were that you had to either know somebody who was smarter than you that you could go to ask. And we had a big room in this building for technical support. And I remember asking some people in the room about a problem I was having. I take them aside individually and find out, you know, most of the people had no clue what they were talking about as I'm following their advice, and it's getting me nowhere. But then you find that one guy, you know, or that gal, as the case may be. In the 90s, there were only about 2 or 3 girls working in the technical support department. No women worked in the assembly line. No women worked in the cage. As women just, I guess, not inclined to do that kind of work, certainly not then. That's a culture issue, obviously, nothing a woman can't do, but that's just how it was. And so there was this guy that I went to, and he was giving me some really good advice, and then there were times where I had to make a phone call to the manufacturer's support line, and that was all American. You never talked to anybody outside of America. It was always an American. You'd explain the situation, and they would explain to try this and try that. And these were long-distance phone calls that cost money. But I had my own office with a closed door, so nobody knew anything about me learning on the job and taking the initiative to get these problems resolved. All they knew is a computer went into my office broken and came out of my office fixed. And what I would sometimes do is I would get caught up with all my work, and I would be bored, and I was really enjoying what I did. So I would go out to the assembly line, and I'd say, hey guys, I got nothing going on today. Can I build a computer? Can I help you? And we'd have little competitions over who could build faster, and we just made a game out of it. The foreman loved that because it brought productivity up. And we just had a lot of fun. I remember I said, I kind of was was my own little rock star in my head, you know. I said, I'm the retail tech, and I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to help you today. And I remember I brought a radio out, and I plugged the radio in, and I turned it up so it blasted throughout the warehouse. And I'm like, this is better. And the foreman was not happy. First it was turn the radio down, and then eventually it was turn the radio off. So I tried to bring fun with me. You know, I tried to, you know, come on guys, let's have some fun, let's do this. And something had happened with a girl I was dating. And one of the salesmen that worked in the retail center was my roommate. After we had met, we got along, and he needed a place to stay, and I was renting my mother's house, the house that I grew up in, and I could use the extra money. I've got an extra room. I was dating this girl. Bad things happened. I felt awful. The next day I called in sick to work, and apparently my roommate told my girlfriend's side of the story, which made me out to be this horrible, horrible person, and said, you don't need to come in today. you can collect your final check on Friday. So then I filed for unemployment after that, and they denied the unemployment. When you file for unemployment, the company has an opportunity to appeal that and say, no, he doesn't get that. And so I had to fight it, and I won. You know, if you quit a job, you don't get unemployment. But if you're laid off or you're fired, then the opportunity is there for unemployment. And the employer that fires you, they have to pay some amount of money. I don't know how that works exactly, but they pay some amount of money because you're on unemployment. And, you know, I had to fight for it. One of the next jobs I got was working, I'm trying to remember the order of events and the way that they all happened. But I might skip around a little bit because there's this story I want to tell. I was working as a contractor at the power company here in Arizona. And it was with a company at the time called Vanstar. And Vanstar would hire techs and then put you out to work at different clients that they had. It could be American Express, it could be the power company, it could be Charles Schwab, it could be any of these big companies. Now at the time, Vanstar was a Fortune 500 company. All these companies I'm about to tell you about, many of them were Fortune 500 companies in the mid to late 90s. And what I ended up doing with this company is instead of driving 30 miles back and forth to work, which is what I had to do for a Tristar, it just occurs to me before I get to that story, there is one I'm forgetting. After I left Tristar, I went to one of their competitors. At that time, it was called Naga Systems, N-A-G-A, Naga Systems. And they were having a lot of returns. They were having a lot of computers coming back broken. And they hired me to fix whatever it was they were doing wrong that they had such a high return rate. As a quality control engineer, that was my job. And there were things like case stores that were constantly breaking and shipping. I'd say, you got to get rid of these cases. You got to get cases without case stores. And they wouldn't do it. Everything I recommended to them to fix the problems, they refused to do. And then when the quarterly reports would come in and the repairs were still as high as they were before, they said, well, what are we paying you for? And I said, that's a good question. I've recommended all these things to change, and you aren't changing them. They had a much smaller technical support room. Only about 4 or 5 people worked in the technical support room. And the owner was this Asian guy. And why can't you just say guy? Why do you have to say Asian guy? Well, keep listening. It matters. He had a pet parrot that he kept in the technical support room. And I remember I was helping with technical support one day to answering the phones. And this darn parrot would just start squawking, and it was really loud, and it was embarrassing to have to ask a customer to repeat what they said because you couldn't hear them, or the customer asking you to repeat what you said because they heard the parrot better than they heard you. It had no business in this business, right? And one thing led to another, and I quit that job. And no, I didn't quit. No, I was let go of that job too. Now that I think about it, what I ended up doing. This is such a long time ago, but it's good for me to retell these stories because it's helping me remember. The foreman from Tristar was let go, and I always liked the foreman. He and I always got along. And I went to the owner at Naga Systems and I said, you know, we got to get this guy John. He's their old foreman. He cracks the whip. He gets it done. And they hired him. And a couple weeks after they hired him, he fired me. You can't make stuff like that up. I'm so glad. It's sort of like if you do the story of what Steve Jobs did with the CEO of Pepsi, got him to come on board to Apple, and the CEO of Pepsi became the CEO of Apple and fired Steve Jobs. But anyway, there's politics involved in all that. I wish I could compare myself to Steve Jobs. I wish. So anyway, a couple weeks after I was let go, I learned that employees went to go to work one day and the doors were all locked. And the owner of the company, as I'm told through the grapevine, left a mountain of debt to the creditors, left all the employees unpaid, and went back to Malaysia, where he's from. See how that Asian thing plays into it? So that was a very short amount of time at that company. I don't think I was there 6 months. And they built similar systems to Tristar. They were big, full-size towers. AT cases, 486s, I'm sure. So anyway, so eventually I got this job with the power company, being a contractor through a company called Vanstar. And you wouldn't know I was a contractor. I came in and I had my own desk. I worked alongside all of the other employees that were actual employees of the power company. I really didn't have any interaction with my employer. My employer was in another building on another other side of town. And I was working 4 miles down the street from where I lived. It was much closer, the pay was better, and they hired me as a temp, so I had no benefits, no sick time, no vacation, nothing. That was traditionally how it was done. Basically, a company like Vanstar offers IT support services to corporations to outsource to. When Vanstar needs people, they go to a temp company, and the temp company, at that time, I got involved. These brothers started a company called Natural Data, which is still around today. And these were good guys, but like any other temp service, what they did is they put ads out in the paper and they would interview people, figure out what their skills are, and put you in a database to match you up with any potential opportunities they have from their clients. And then their clients have clients, right? It gets kind of complicated. So there basically are three hands in my paycheck. Whatever the power company was paying Vanstar for me, Vanstar was then paying the temp service, and my check came from the temp service. So you can imagine how much less I was getting compared to how much the power company was paying, right? But that's how it worked. Probably still works the same way today to some extent. And after about over I want to say 18 months, the boss in charge of the contracting company, Vanstar, came over to me and he said, we have to get you hired. You should have only been a temp for 90 days. And I said, yeah, I agree. I would certainly love to have benefits and sick time and vacation, all that. Health care. And he said, great, I'm going to get you $13 an hour, and we're going to get you signed on. He says, I got in trouble from my superiors because we're not supposed to have temps as long as you, and we need to get this taken care of ASAP. I said, great, no argument for me, let's get it done. So he comes back in about a week, 2 weeks, and he says, all right, here's the contract, just need you to sign it, and we can welcome you on as an employee. And I said, okay, we got a problem. He said, what? I said, it says here $12 an hour. He goes, yeah. I said, you told me $13 an hour. He goes, well, I don't know how that happened, but you know, if I have to take this paperwork back, it's going to be a couple more weeks. You've already been a temp for so long, would you just sign it? I said, that's not what we agreed to. We didn't agree to this. No, I'm not going to sign it. Remember, that's $2,080 a year, that $1 difference, right? And I'd already figured this out from my earlier situation. So he's like, geez, I got to get this done again. So he leaves. He comes back a couple weeks later. This was, I want to say this was early December. So he comes back in early January and he goes, okay, I got you your $13 an hour. And what I need you to do now is fill out this paperwork that authorizes a background check, and I need you to get a drug test. And so we didn't need that a couple weeks ago. He goes, it's the new year, and this is for all new hires. Every new hire has to do this. I said, yeah, but I'm not a new hire. I've been with your company for 18 months. You want my background check? Just look at the last 18 months. Ask your customer that I'm here supporting you, helping your customer. Ask them what they think of me. It doesn't work that way anymore. I can't do that. This is company policy. It's for all new employees. I go, but I'm not a new employee. Because you are a new employee. According to the paperwork, you're a new employee. What is your problem? What are you so, I got you your $13 an hour. I did what you asked me to do. What now? What is it? You have something to hide? And I said, look, the whole idea of taking a drug test is offensive to me. Unless you have reasonable cause, it doesn't make any sense. If my behavior is odd or there's some suspicion, I understand. But, it's for me to go into a room and urinate into a cup is dehumanizing. Well, everybody has to do it. I go, well, everybody who was already hired? No, only new people. So if you would have gotten the paperwork right in December, I wouldn't have to go through this. He goes, what do you have to hide? I go, let me tell you something. I'm looking at this background check, and it says that I'm authorizing you to look at my credit report. I don't handle money here. Why in the world would you have any business looking at my credit report? And there were a couple other things, but the credit report one really stuck out to me. He says, I don't make the rules. I'm just trying to get you hired on. That's all I'm trying to do. If you don't want to be hired on, then, we'll let you go and you can go somewhere else. I go, look, this is wrong. I really like my job. I like the people I work with. I like what I do, and I want to continue doing it. And it really disappoints me to say this, but if you give me another $1 an hour, I'll sign the background check paperwork and pee in a cup. But I said, I am not happy with that. It's just not right. And he just looks at me and he goes, you want $1 an hour more? It's not a job skill. I'm not paying you an extra $1 for, your background check and passing a drug test is not a job skill. I said, no, but it's a job qualification, and it's going to make me more qualified than somebody else, which justifies the extra $1 an hour. And he's like, oh my God, you should have been you should have been around in the 60s preaching on the steps of Berkeley. What are you doing here now? Grabs his paperwork, he's disgusted, and he walks off. So he comes back, he's got new paperwork, $14 an hour, and I sign it. All right. I go pee in a cup. Everything's good. Then I get a phone call at my desk, and this lady says, hi, I'm with the so-and-so corporation. Your company has paid us to do your background check, and we're having difficulty being able to verify your A+ certification and your high school diploma. Could you fax those to me, please? I said, no. She says, what? I said, you're some stranger calling me on the phone, asking me to send you private confidential information at my expense to a long distance number over a fax? Are you insane? I go, didn't you say your company does background checks? Is that how it works? Maybe I should do that too. I'll start my own background check company. I'll tell a client that I can background check their customers for them for a certain fee, and then I'll call those customers and ask those customers to voluntarily submit the information that I'm getting paid to investigate. So then I don't even have to do any work, right? You just have me do your work for you. And she sort of didn't know what to say. And I said, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'll make copies of my diploma and my certifications, and I will give them to my boss. My boss can then give them to your company, so your company can give them back to my boss. How's that? She was like, fine, great. So that's what I did. And in doing that, I was showing how the preposterous nature of this whole system, right? Because the company had policies that you had to have a background check performed by this third party that they were paying, then your paperwork had to come from that third party. But I presented my paperwork to the boss directly, which was not acceptable. So he had no choice but to give it to the third party, so the third party could then officially give it to him. What does any of this got to do with IT? Well, this is the way many of us were treated. We were treated like pawns in a chess game where you were nothing special. If you didn't show up to work, there was somebody else who could do your job. You could be sent off to any potential customer's location. If somebody that also worked for the same contractor didn't show up to work or quit, they could tell you, you have to go over there today. and you did. You had to. And that never happened with me. I always went to the same place, did the same job, same hours, working with the same people. I might as well have been an employee of the power company. Well, here's where things get good. They finally hired me. It all went official, and 2 weeks later, Vanstar, the company I was working for that created this whole mess, got bought out by a company called Intercom. Now, the power company that I was that I was working at through Vanstar, they had a really negative experience previously with Intercom. So when they found out that Vanstar was bought by Intercom, they said, well, that's it. Contract's over. We're going to go to somebody else. So I had my benefits for 2 weeks, and Vanstar said, we can put you somewhere else. We can put you at American Express. We can put you here. But I wanted to work where I was. So APS is the name of the power company, Arizona Power Service. They decided to go with a company called MicroAge. Now, MicroAge was notorious for overworking their employees, paying them little to nothing, and doing everything they can to make it clear that you need them more than they need you, as far as an employee-employer situation goes. And I had known this. I've heard stories, and I really didn't ever want to work for MicroAge. So what ends up happening is a representative from MicroAge is at APS, and he comes over to me, and he kind of slyly says, do you like your job here? I said, absolutely, I love my job here. He goes, you want to keep doing your job here? So of course I want to keep doing my job here. He goes, here's my card. Call me and make an appointment for an interview. We did not have this discussion. So now I'm on the fence. So I just went through all this effort of finally getting off being a temp, getting full-time, getting benefits. But I also want to stay working where I'm working. I mean, what difference does it make to me who's writing my check? I'm going to do the same job at the same place, working with the same people. The only thing that changes in my world is the name on who the check is from. So I go to the meeting with this guy from MicroAge, another Fortune 500 company, and I think they were bought out by Compaq, and of course Compaq was bought out by HP. You see all this, little fish gets eaten by the big fish. It's a pattern that keeps repeating itself. And so I went to the interview and I met this guy, and I just told him bluntly, I said, look, MicroAge has sort of a bad reputation among technicians in my world over, low pay and ridiculous rules. And I just want to clarify that we aren't going to have this issue, because I just got benefits at this other company, and I'm going to be giving that up and starting as a temp again for up to 90 days when you decide to bring me on full time. And I don't want to give that up if this is routine here. If you verify to me that, yes, this is how we do things, then I don't want to work here. And he said, oh, absolutely not. We're not that company that you heard about. That's not the way I do business. And I said, well, just let me give you an example. Let's just say attire. Would you make us change what we're wearing? Would we have to invest money into a different wardrobe? Because as a temp, I don't have money for that. He goes, oh, listen, if we're gonna leave everything the same. If we were gonna make any changes, we would talk to all you guys who were there, because what do we know? We're just coming into this. We don't know what's going on. So before we would make any changes, we would talk to you guys. We'd have a meeting about it and get some feedback. Okay, that's reasonable. I quit Vanstar. I went to work for MicroAge. 2 weeks later, the boss says, we're changing the attire requirement. You need to come in, no more blue jeans, you got to wear slacks, you also have to wear a tie. And I said, well, all the APS employees that I work with, they wear a button-down shirt and blue jeans. Why would I dress like I was superior to them when I'm working right alongside of them? And he says, well, we might need you somewhere else. And that somewhere else may require that. You never know. I go, yeah, but I'm crawling around on the floor. I'm changing toner. This is not the outfit to wear to do that kind of work. Pulling cables, you don't do that in slacks and a tie and a shirt. button down. He says, yeah, that's how we do it. I said, well, you told me you weren't going to make any changes without talking to everybody first. Remember we had that in the interview? It was one of my main concerns. And I actually don't remember what his response was to me, but obviously wasn't a good response. And I think he sort of said, what's your objection to dressing up? What's the problem? And I said, well, the problem is money. The problem is I barely make enough money to make ends meet. And now I'm supposed to spend a few $100 on clothes to continue, to go into debt, basically, to continue my job, doing the same job I've always done when nobody's ever complained about the attire. No one's ever said never ever said I was unprofessional. No one's ever had you're just making this up. And he says, let me try and put it in a way you can understand. We have numerous other clients besides APS. For example, we have American Express. Now, you do the laptops here at APS. And let's say the guy who does the laptops at American Express, he quits or he's sick, he doesn't come in that day, and they're having an issue, an emergency over at APS. We need to send somebody over there. And we send you. And you arrive, but you've just got your button-down shirt and your jeans. And American Express has a strict attire policy, a strict, attire policy, I'm trying to think of the word, but a clothing, the way you look, that you cannot go in there if you don't meet that dress code. I go, well, what do I care? He goes, what do you mean, what do you care? I go, I'm not the one with the broken laptop. I mean, if you're more concerned about whether or not I'm wearing a tie than you are about me getting you up and running again, what difference does that make in my world? And he goes, do you think you're a god and people have to kneel before you? It's like, what? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I said, look, let me put it to you this way. Let's say a doctor, a surgeon, is out for a jog. And he's got his sweatsuit on. He's got sweat stains, pit stains, and his hair's all tousled up. And he's jogging along, and he sees a guy hit by a car, and the guy's laying there on the road, and he's bleeding. And the doctor says, I'm a doctor, I can help you. And the guy says, you're not dressed like a doctor, don't touch me. And so the guy lays there in the street and dies. What difference did it make to the doctor? He's just offering to help. And I swear to you, I promise I am not making this up. He looks me in the eye and he says, maybe that doctor will think twice about his appearance before he leaves the house from that point forward. What? Maybe it's best if you collect your things. I said, yeah, I think so. And that was my last day. So I went from being a temp to finally, after a year and a half, getting to be full-time, going through the whole background check nonsense and the drug test BS, only to, in order to keep my job, switch companies to be hired as a temp, only a couple weeks later to have no job at all. So that is something they never, ever prepared me for in college or in high school. Nothing prepared me for these kind of politics that went down. It was crazy, the kind of stuff. And I'm very young and naive. At that age, a lot of energy, I'm going to change the world. And you bump into the politics. And it's the politics of it that was the most difficult for me because they don't make any sense. It's about ego. It's about not so much working harder so you get ahead, but many people going out of their way to point out how bad somebody else is doing in order for them to move up in the company. Just crazy. Now there's a lot more stories about APS I could tell you about. I was there for about 2 years. But now I want to get to the other jobs. So I worked for a company called Entex, E-N-T-E-X, Entex Information Services. And Entex, they had this sort of unspoken policy that if a big client like Motorola called you and you were working with a smaller client, drop everything that you're doing immediately and do whatever the big client wants you to do at once. So it was really unfortunate for the smaller clients, or if we were doing, for example, they had a contract with HP or Dell to go out on site to do warranty work. And Dell or HP, I can't remember who it was, used to have to fill out this paperwork. And if you didn't dot an I or cross a T, they wouldn't honor it and they wouldn't pay the company. And then the company would have it out with the text going, you know, we're not getting the money we're supposed to be getting to pay you guys because you guys aren't filling in these, you're not filling everything in precisely. And apparently they couldn't resubmit the paperwork or something, I don't understand. But Dell or HP, again, I don't remember who it was, or Compaq, it was one of the big three. We're looking for every way possible to have an excuse to not pay NTEX for the work that the technicians for NTEX did on behalf of these companies. So what would happen as a result of, perhaps this was part of the mix, was let's say you've got a customer who's got a bad printer, just a regular customer, and Dell has referred that call to NTEX, NTEX has given it to you. And suddenly your pager goes off, because back then we didn't have cell phones, we had pagers. The pager would go off and you'd find out it was Motorola. Well, forget fixing that printer. Take care of Motorola. When you take care of Motorola, and you have time, then deal with that. And this was I'd never experienced this before. And they used to play a lot of games with service level agreements. They would, they put me to work at Intel, and I've told the story about Intel before, but I'll share it with you again. My first day at Intel, I walk in the place, and the first thing I'm thinking is, I don't belong here. I'm far too stupid to work here. Everybody around me is really, really smart. And the campus, 5 buildings, all attached together, a huge cafeteria. It had a Pizza Hut and a Taco Bell, all these little like fast food stands. They're like portable. I never saw anything like that before. Normally the cafeteria, like at Arizona, at APS, was just an ordinary cafeteria like you'd find in a school, a high school. This was almost like a shopping mall. I was like, wow, this is really cool. And you had to pay for your food. It wasn't free, but it was still pretty darn neat. And so my first day there, the boss comes over, he introduces himself to me, and he goes, listen, I don't know where I'm gonna put you yet. I have a position open in laptops. Does that interest you? And I said, oh my gosh, that would be perfect for me. I was doing laptops exclusively at APS. It's what I'm very good at it. I would love that position. It would be perfect. He goes, great, listen, hang out, walk around a little bit, get to know the place. I'll come back at the end of the day and we'll follow up on this. So I'm sitting at this big round lunch table with all these other IT guys. I don't know anybody, you know, and I'm socially awkward anyway. I can talk to you in front of the camera, no problem. But put me in a room full of people I don't know face to face, and I'll probably just avert my eyes and wait for somebody to say hi to me. You know, that's just how I am. So there's an older guy with a beard, and he's telling one of the younger guys that when you want to copy a file, make sure you use Xcopy and not copy. So this is DOS days. And he says, if you don't do that, it may not actually copy the file despite saying it did. Well, I was like, I'm sorry. To the old guy with the beard, I said, well, did you just say that copy doesn't copy a file? Even though it says, it'll say like one file copied, it didn't. He goes, yeah, that's how it works. I go, I'm literally like doing this with my eyes. I'm like, is there a camera? Is this like a joke? Or are you putting me on, right? You're testing the new guy to see if I just nod my head to go along like I'm a yes man? He says, no, I'm serious. No, come. Is there a candid camera? Used to be a show on TV called Candid Camera. Is there a candid camera? You guys, you're setting me up. This is a setup. This is like initiation of the new guy. It's like a hazing. And he's getting upset at me. He goes, no, I'm dead serious. I go, well, no, that's not how the copy command works. That's not how it works. He goes, it absolutely does work that way. So little do I realize I'm actually embarrassing this guy who's in charge of all these younger guys. My first day here, this is not what I'm thinking. I'm only interested like Mr. Spock. I'm interested in facts. I don't know this guy's name. I don't know his role. All I know is he's wrong. right? That's all I care about. It's a hell of a way to start your first day. So I said, listen, why don't we, when we're done with lunch, let's go to one of the workstations over here and let's create a batch file. And in one batch file, we'll put the letter A, and then we'll put another batch file on a floppy disk and we'll put the letter C. And that's all it's going to have. And you're telling me, if I understand what you're saying correctly, that if I put the floppy disk that has the letter C in the batch file in the drive, and I copy the file that has the letter A in it with the same file name from the C drive to the A drive, it'll say one file copied, but when I open the batch file, it won't be changed. It'll still have a letter C in it. He goes, yeah, let's try it. I don't have time for this. I said, well, look, I don't want to go around being wrong. I mean, if I'm wrong, I want to know. Wouldn't you want to know? Fine. So we get up and we go and do it, and sure enough, I'm right. And he says, well, I don't know what to tell you, kid, but one day that's going to come back to bite you on the ass. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I go, no, it always, it's a computer. It will always do the same thing. And he just kind of harumphs and walks off. So then at the end of the day, the boss comes up to me and says, I've decided to give the laptop job to somebody else, and I'll find another place for you tomorrow. We'll figure it out tomorrow. I was devastated. Driving from my house to Intel was 32 miles each way. I called the boss at Entex, who was the boss of the boss that told me that he had this laptop position at Entex, and he was the boss of the guy with the beard who I inadvertently embarrassed on my first day in front of all of the people he's in charge of. So I went right to the top. I go, look, there's no place for me at Intel. Do you have another client you can put me at? Because and I was told I would have a laptop position. I was really excited. It's perfect for me. And then he yanked it out from under me without so much as an interview. You know, how could he compare me to somebody else if he doesn't know anything about me? He didn't give me a chance. So can you just put me, and he says, Kerry, relax, have a beer, go to Intel tomorrow morning, I'll take care of this. So the next morning I'll go back to Intel, I don't know what's happening. And the boss at Intel says, you, over here now. So we go outside in this courtyard area at Intel, where people go out to smoke. And he says to me, who do you think you are? I said, well, I don't understand. He goes, you think I'm stupid? I got a call from the boss about you calling and complaining about this laptop job that I gave to somebody else. I said, yeah, well, you told me you were going to give it to me, and then at the end of the day, you took it away. You never gave me a chance. You didn't interview me. You know nothing about me. And yet you decided somebody else was more qualified? You know, there's no reason for me to be here if you're not going to put me in the laptop job. And he goes, you know, I got people here that would be willing to sweep the floors just to get a foot in Intel. But I'll tell you what I'll do. And he's angry. I mean, he is angry. This is only the second day of my job. This is my boss. This is like the head guy at Intel for the company that I work for. He goes, you know what? I'm going to give you that laptop job, but you better not F it up. And he didn't say F. Like, and I wasn't used to this kind of profanity being used in a professional workplace like this. So it kind of like, my reaction was like, it was blindsided me. I go, I'm not going to mess it up. This is what I do. And he goes, all right, now everything else from this day, from this time right now forward, we're going to forget all this happened. This is all going to be water under the bridge, and we're going to start over again. Does that sound good? So that's all I ever wanted. That's all I wanted. He goes, all right, and he shakes my hand. So I was probably, 25 years old. And so I wasn't really trained in how to negotiate and this whole sort of working environment of the politics and the bureaucracies and the red tape and power trips that people have. It was all new to me. I had barely tasted a little bit of it at other companies, and this was just kind of a renewing pattern over and over again. It wasn't about equality or fairness. It was just trying to get out of you everything they could get out of you. I mean, working for these contractors, there were guys that I worked with that had 3 pagers on. One pager would be for the client they have over there, and one pager would be for another guy. And when their pager would go off, they'd have to, like, they couldn't tell which one it was. They'd have to visually inspect each one to figure out which pager it was. And I remember they wanted to put me on a pager for 24 hours in case they needed me. And I said, well, what do you pay me for that? And he goes, well, what do you mean, what do we pay you for that? You want to get paid for doing nothing? He goes, look, here's how it works. Each tech takes a turn wearing the pager 1 week at a time. If the pager goes off, you get time and a half. I go, but what if it doesn't go off? Well, you don't get paid. I'm not going to pay you to do nothing. I go, well, you should. What are you, insane? I don't think that's what he said, but that was the way I read it. I go, look, I want to get paid because I can't go on a date with a girl. I can't go to a movie. I can't go to a party and get drunk. Because if that pager goes off, I have to be presentable to the client. I've got to be able to get in the car and go. You're telling me I can't go out of town, or, I have to be available. So I want to get paid for that. I go, doctors that are on call, they get paid for it. Well, oh, so now you think you're as high up as a doctor. Oh my God. I said, look, if you're not going to pay me for it, I'm not going to wear it. I'm not doing it. So that turned out to be a huge mess. But I've diverted from my story. So there I am, my second day of Intel. I have my first day at the laptop position, and I'm working with 2 of the greatest people I've ever worked with in my life. One guy's name, well, actually there were 3. One guy's name was John, and this gorgeous woman, her name was Monica, and she was just a sight to be seen. Made me look forward to going to work. And just, everything about her, not just physical beauty, her whole sort of personality just lit up the whole room. And I was liking my job. So my first day there, they had a bad update that went out to all the laptop employees that had laptops, which were mostly managerial type people. And they had this printout, it was about, I don't know, maybe about yay thick, that they were sending out to have people fix this bad update. It had to do with the contacts getting erased in Outlook or something. And back then, it couldn't have been Outlook. No, it could have been. It could have been. I don't remember now. But Intel at that time had 25,000 employees or something, and then like the whole contact list got wiped out or corrupted. I can't remember exactly. And there was this whole procedure you had to do to fix it. So I'm looking at this, and I'm going through the steps. Like here's a laptop. The manager that owns this laptop isn't going to go through this. You need to do this for everybody who has a laptop. You have to manually do this. And so why don't we just make a batch file and automate this? You know how to do that? Yeah, it's easy. Remember, I never gave myself credit for what I knew. I was always intimidated by people being smarter than me, only to find out most of the people around me were not smarter than me. I have achieved where I have been simply by comparing myself to others and realizing how bad they were, which is really bad self-confidence. If that's what you do, if that's what it takes for you to have confidence, is to find somebody else who does what you do and see how badly they do it, and then you go, wow, I'm actually better than that guy. That's not good self-confidence. So anyway, I wrote the batch file. I wrote it in a couple hours, tested it out, fixed the bugs, and I gave it to my coworker, John. Now, John and Monica, the people I was working with, they were Intel employees. I was a contractor. So the Intel employee took it to his Intel boss. The Intel boss went to my boss and said, this is the most amazing thing ever. He's taken a 2-hour procedure, which, mistakes can happen, and he's made it take like less than 10 minutes by just clicking a button, and no mistakes are possible. Whoever this guy is, he's fantastic. So my boss, who earlier was chewing me out in the morning, 10 minutes before we leave, he comes over and he's all teeth. Carrie, you did a great job today on the laptop, man. You just blew them away. Great job. And I was so happy, so happy. It was a hell of a first day. Well, my first actual day working, my second day there. I was feeling so good. And a couple of weeks went by. You know, the guy with the beard, he and I didn't work together, but he never liked me. So this guy comes up to me, this other employee that works for the same company I work for, who's also contracted at Intel. He says to me, can we speak for a minute? And I said, sure. And he says, I hear Dave doesn't like you. He thinks you're an arrogant a-hole. And I thought, oh boy, they're going to fire me. You know, I just thought, this is it. So I was, I don't know what to say. And he goes, he kind of sees, I think he sees the look of horror on my face. And he goes, well, listen, he thinks I'm an arrogant a-hole too. And I think you and I would work well together. And I have this project over at Charles Schwab that's after hours, that would be time and a half. Would you be interested in joining my team? So this was so bizarre, because these are things I thought were bad. These negative, bad things, horrific things, turned into something the exact opposite. Once again, no education in high school, no education in college prepared me for these kind of politics. I had no idea this sort of thing happened. Maybe I'm exceptionally naive, I don't know. Well, clearly I am. But growing up that young and having that, you know, inspiration to want to make a difference in the world, I thought that's what everybody was like. I didn't realize there were people that were just out to protect themselves or protect their egos. That was perhaps a world my mother shielded me from. I don't know. And it was really shocking to me. And there were other political things, like I would have to deliver new computers from time to time for customers. And that would mean bringing the desktop, the monitor, and these were CRTs. These were the big glass monitors. Generally, they were 17 inches. Sometimes they were 20 inch. They were big, heavy monitors. And they were moving our work area. And they said, we need to get with you, with the moving people, to coordinate when you're going to have free time to clear your space and pack it up so they can move it. I go, this is what I do for a living. Just let me know when my space is ready and I'll move it myself. They said, no, you're not allowed to move it yourself. I said, what do you mean I'm not allowed to? I'm busy, I have work to do, or you're asking me to stop working to arrange this. Just, I can squeeze it in between jobs, I can move. They go, no, this is a union job. You cannot do what the union workers are paid to do. It's a violation. I go, but I deliver new systems. I deliver the equipment and I set it up. He goes, that's right. But I can't move the equipment. That's right, you are not allowed to move the equipment. The same equipment that I moved to install, I cannot move from one location to another once I've installed it. Yes. So again, more politics, more of the same sort of, this doesn't make any sense to me. So I had to deal with stuff like that. There was a guy that I worked with on my team. They always emphasize team, you know, we're all together, we're all a family, and this guy he didn't speak English very well. And he was at a customer's workstation, at a customer's desk. And this lady, an older lady, middle-aged lady, had a picture of herself when she was much younger on her desk. And from what I understand, I wasn't there, but from what I understand, he said something like, wow, you were really pretty when you were younger. And she took offense to that. And he was fired immediately without any sort of, your side of the story, not interested. You see, the politics involved, if you upset Intel and you lose your multi-million-dollar contract for providing IT support versus letting go somebody because they didn't know English very well and they didn't, what they meant to say, it just came out wrong. There was no harm intended. He was just making conversation. There was less legal loss or litigation or financial loss to just fire him than to try and make it right and risk losing the Intel contract. So there was no loyalty from the contractor to their employees. If you did anything that jeopardized the contract or what they foresaw as jeopardizing the contract, whether you were right or wrong is irrelevant, you're gone. So I came into work one day and my teammate, my family member is missing. And where is he? Well, we let him go. Well, so you weren't going to tell me? I mean, you tell us we're all a family, you tell us we're all a team, and then you do stuff behind our back like this to other teammates and family members? You're getting a mixed message. You're sending a mixed message here. Which one is it? There would be, the boss at Intel got replaced. The boss for this gets complicated because there's the contracting company, right? And so when I'm talking about bosses, primarily I'm talking about the boss of the company that I worked for, not the boss of the company that I worked at. So the boss at Entex was replaced by another person. This person came in with a college degree in probably business administration or something, had no clue what we did. They did not promote from within. They didn't take one of my fellow techs who was perhaps a bit older and more mature and knew the job and put him into a position of manager. No, they hired somebody out of the newspaper that had the degree who had no clue what was going on and put this person in charge. And it made our life very, very difficult because we ended up having to basically train this guy how to manage us. And they did that 2 or 3 times. And it was so frustrating because you think, wouldn't it be great if they would just promote from within and give us something to work towards? No, didn't work that way. And I always thought it did. I always thought you started at the bottom and you work your way to the top. No, you got to get in wherever you get in. So that's why the interviewing process is so important. You better get as much money as you need. The line they like to tell you is, well, I'll tell you what, we'll do this rate of pay for, let's say, 90 days, and if you prove yourself, we can do a review and give you a raise at that time. Never, ever do that because you will very rarely ever find any employer that will actually follow up. They may even go so far as to say, we never said that. So you've got to get the job you want and the money you want during your initial interview. And again, with my naivety and my lack of self-esteem, when I was offered a job, it didn't matter how much they were going to pay me. It was irrelevant. Somebody thought I was worth hiring, and that was all I needed to hear. And I was my own worst enemy when it came to that sort of thing. And there was really nobody to guide me or help me. My dad lived in another state. My mother never worked until much later in life. So there wasn't anybody to guide me with regards to that. And if you learn how to negotiate and you understand the way the politics generally play out, you can prepare yourself much better to avoid these sort of things from ever happening. And the Intel job, I loved working there. I worked with some of the best people, so I have some of the best memories. And it was a great place to work. But unfortunately, with Entex, here's another political thing Entex did. Entex would reward you, not necessarily by giving you a raise, but by giving you shares of the company. So depending on how long you were there, you on your anniversary, you would get more shares the longer you were there. But the company was not publicly owned, right? So here was the promise. We're going to give you these worthless pieces of paper with the idea that when the day comes that we become a public company, and we have an initial public offering or an IPO where people then can buy shares, that's your money. Whatever we sell the shares for, that's yours. Well, that company never went public. It never happened. And so all the people that worked there for all those years and collected those pieces of paper, at the end of the day, it gave them not one penny more. It was a political carrot. It was an illusionary carrot dangling, saying, one day you're going to be able to eat that carrot. But of course, the carrot never existed. So it was all an illusion, and it was meant to motivate people to work harder and to be loyal to the company. So I think what ends up happening, a lot of people, sometimes I see some of the comments that come in on the videos, and people will say something along the lines that they come off a bit rude or very blunt. But it's because of what's happened to me in life that I've been trained by society around me and the culture around me in order to protect myself from these things happening, to be very clear in what I'm saying and to be very clear about what's serious and what's a joke, because a lot of these stories that I'm telling you could come across as jokes. If they didn't really happen, you'd think, well, that's a joke, right? No, it's not a joke. And so I have found my sense of humor has severely diminished compared to when I was, say, 25 years old to where I am now. Because to me, when somebody makes a joke like that, it's not funny because it's happened, right? So for example, a customer like 2 years ago was in a hurry for me to get this problem fixed, and they didn't want to pay a lot of money for it. And I said, you know, if you would have told me about this problem when it first surfaced instead of waiting until it got worse, this would have been a lot easier for me. And she goes, yeah, that's what I care about in my world, is making things easier for you. And I said, well, if it's easier for me, it'll take less time, which means it'll cost you less money. She goes, well, I was just joking. I go, well, I'm just saying, joke or not, right? And that's where the problem happens, because there are things that have occurred in over and over again, not just once, where you would think that's funny if it didn't happen in real life. And so when I talk about computers, as much fun as I have doing it, I'm also very serious about it, because it's been drilled into my head that this is nothing to joke about, nothing to laugh about. This is your life, this is your salary, these are your benefits, your background check, your violation of your rights. You know, wear 3 pagers, don't get paid to wear the pagers unless you get called. Just anything they could do to take advantage. And it's just quickly, well, not quickly, it has eroded over time to what I am today. And that is, I take what I do very seriously. I have a lot of pride in my work. And I do like to have fun doing it. But I think sometimes people leave comments and they think they're being funny, but they don't realize that it can be read an entirely different way. And then it sort of creates situations that were based on somebody's intent was to make somebody else smile. And it's unfortunate that this is what the world has become in general now. There's a lot of intolerance to humor, and I think that's a real shame. Humor was a very, very big part of my life. I actually went on stage at the Improv during a competition to be what was the funniest person in Phoenix. And my audition went really, really well, and then when I actually went on stage in front of an audience, bombed. And it's I never want to feel that feeling again. I only did it once, and I never want to do that again. I felt so awful. And again, you know, here you are, I'm just trying to make people laugh, only to walk off the stage feeling terrible. Makes me never want to do that again. You know, you touch a hot stove and you burn yourself. You don't want to touch a hot stove anymore. So I think this happens with age. You start to get a little worn down, and you start to feel a little repetition of things. You start to foresee all the worst. Instead of looking forward to all, I'm going to change the world, you start looking at all the potential things that are going to go wrong. But this is a choice, and it's maybe just self-awareness is about all you can do to help control that. After I left Intel, I worked for a company. Oh, I know what happened. They had promised me a raise at Intel, and they promised it for about 6 months. And the 6 months, they promised it like it was going to happen really, really soon. And I'd ask, how's that raise coming along? And we're still waiting to hear back. After 6 months, it occurred to me I was never going to get this raise. And they were hiring new employees at a higher rate of pay than they were paying me. So they were asking me to train new hires. Well, they were paying me less money than they were paying the new hire. Some of the new hires were people that had absolutely no IT experience whatsoever. And I said, I don't think it's right that you're paying me less than the people you're asking me to train. And they said, well, we don't have any control over that. Corporate makes those decisions. I go, then what business did you have telling me you were going to give me a raise? If you're now telling me you have no control over raises. I think I've been patient and reasonable waiting for 6 months. So that's when I got a job with a company called Infinicis. And Infinicis was just 12 miles down the road, whereas Intel was 32 miles. Infinicis was going to pay me $2 more an hour, which is the equivalent of about $4,160, right? 2,080 plus 2,080. So $2 more an hour, and I don't have the traffic and the drive. And this was working for Infinicis, again through a temp service, for the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. Now, I want to emphasize, as I tell you these stories, I'm only focusing on the negative here. Obviously, I love what I do. I want to keep underscoring that I love my job. I love what I do. But there's a dark side to it. And I want to kind of counter the positive stuff with the negative in an attempt to balance it out and give you a better idea of what to expect if you want to do this for a living. And for those of you who have been in my shoes, who can nod your head and smile that it didn't just happen to you. As I learned, it didn't just happen to me. But the job at the Department of Environmental Quality was very interesting. What ended up happening is I went to the boss at Intel, at the contractor that I was working for, which is Entex, and I said, I want to give you my 2 weeks notice because I found another job that's closer to my house and is going to pay me better. You know, I've waited for this raise you guys have promised me. It's clear it's not coming in, so I'm just going to move on. I love my job here and I love what I do, but I can't afford to work here any longer. And they said, what would it take for you to stay? And this is just a private one-on-one with me and the boss of Entex at Intel. I said, well, I mean, everybody knows you guys will not match salaries. You're afraid that if you match it for one person, then everybody's going to do it. So what's the point of having this discussion? He goes, well, sometimes things change. What would it take for you to stay? And I said, honestly, I want some recognition for the hard work that I've done. Something. A nickel an hour, a piece of paper that I could put on the wall that says, this is in recognition of the hard work and dedication that Kerry Holzman has contributed. That's all I want. He says, nice working with you. And it was like being stabbed in the back. It was almost like he did it just to demean me. And I felt my eyes kind of well up like I was going to cry. I was really upset. And I just kind of sucked it up and went back to work. And I was telling the story. They're asking me to train my replacement. And I was telling him what happened. And then the replacement, I guess, went and told him. And he came over to where I was sitting and he said, you can just go ahead and get your stuff now. We don't need your 2 weeks. So then I started my job with Infinicis with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. And there, the place was a mess. The employee that was working there was stealing. He openly told me, he's like, you need any RAM? And this was back when you had, 4 meg modules, not gig, meg. And they were expensive. These were called SIMs, single inline memory modules. Before there were DIMMs, there were SIMs. And they're a little smaller. Put them in your pocket and walk out with them, and they're very expensive. He goes, yeah, if you ever need any memory, there's some right there. He wasn't subtle about it at all. And a lot of IT jobs, they're in the basement. And no differently, I had an office, and the office was probably about as big as this kitchen, and I had doors in the office because I had inventory. I had monitors and keyboards and computers. Stuff had to be locked up. And my first goal when I started there was to get caught up and get everything organized. And for the first year, that's what I did. I got everything caught up and organized, and they loved me. I could do no wrong. I was heaven sent as far as all the bosses at the Department of Environmental Quality were concerned. And then they raised the bar that they wanted more from me. And I was working all by myself. So my boss was located in another building. And I had this whole building, and the building next door was all, 2 floors of the building next door were part of the Department of Environmental Quality. And I was the sole computer technician for what was about 600, 700 employees. So it was busy. And the government jobs are the worst ones. The government ones, there's a lot of backstabbing. It was very similar to being in high school again. People's behavior very much focused on making other people look bad. That was seemed to be their primary goal for most of the people. Certainly anybody that had any power. And I remember the person that was in charge of the IT department. We had some issues with things going missing from my office, and I brought this up on a number of occasions. I said, there's stuff missing. Somebody's taking stuff. I lock the door in my office. Who else has a key? Well, the boss says she's the only one that has a key. So I'm in my office one day and I'm on the phone and the door's closed and locked. Somebody's knocking on the door, but I can't put the phone down. I'm like on hold or something, and there's no speakerphone. This is, again, no cell phones. So I just stayed quiet, let them think I'm not there. And I hear keys jingle, and I see the door unlock, and this woman comes into my office. And she's shocked to see me there, like, how dare you be in your office and not answer your door? And I said, how dare you have a key? Why do you have a key to my office? Why? And she would do everything she can to divert from answering that question. She was trying to focus on the fact that I was in my office with the door closed, and I was trying to focus on the fact that she had a key she wasn't supposed to have. And so we went round and round in circles, neither one listening to the other one. She went to her boss. Her boss came down to me and said, if you're in your office, these doors need to be open. I said, absolutely not. It's my office. I'm not your employee. I'm a contractor. Somebody else said, you can't talk to her like that. I said, I'm not an employee. She can't talk to me like that. You don't understand the way a contract works? I'm here to fulfill an obligation. We have a problem with theft. That room has to be locked. I want to know why that person had a key. Again, they did everything they could to divert from that. Well, I'm the boss, and I don't have a lock on my door. You sure as heck aren't going to have a lock on your door. I go, all this inventory is owned by my company, and I'm held accountable for it. There's a lock on that door for a reason. And they said, what we're going to do? We're going to move your office, and we're going to put you in a big fishbowl. That's what they called it, the fishbowl, so we can watch you. And I said, well, you obviously have a lot more time on your hands than I do if your job is to just turn on and watch how somebody else works. And the people were like, oh my God, you cannot talk to that person. Don't you know who that person is? They're high up. I go, they're not high up. They're not. I don't work for them. I'm not your employee. You cannot talk to me like this. So we had a little bit of a tiff, and their computer department, I can't remember what they did. They did like new installs or something. I can't remember. Actually, I did the new installs. But they had an IT department. And I remember a guy from another department called me and said, this isn't working and this isn't working. And I said, well, that's the IT department's job. That's not my job. He says, I know, I've called them 3 times on this and they haven't done it. And I said, I cannot believe that they would do that to you. I mean, this lack of incompetence and inconsideration is unbelievable. I'll take care of it. And I did it. And then the second person in charge called me and he said, I hear you've been talking badly about the IT department. Okay, so that either means you're listening to my phone calls, or the person that I helped then went and told my boss that I spoke poorly of the IT department, which is why they had to call me. That doesn't make sense. Why would somebody say something negative about me when they asked me for help and I did a job I didn't have to do just to help them, only to be punished for it? And then it happened again. And again, I said, I just can't believe the IT department would do that to you. That's so unprofessional. Why do they even have jobs? What do they do here? And once again, I took care of it for the guy. And once again, I heard that you were talking negatively about the IT department. You know, this can't happen again. And I said, you know what? I could just leave. How about that? You know, you don't have any of my job is not documented. There's nobody who knows how to do this job. You realize that? He goes, yeah, we need you to document what you do now that you mention that. I said, well, I don't have time for that. There's no time. So you'll have to talk to my employer to get somebody else down here to do the job while I do the documentation of the job, if that's what you want. It's not part of the contract. And remember, the first year they loved me. So then, the way government jobs often work is when a new director comes in, a lot of times a director can bring employees from their previous governmental position with them to their new governmental position. And this puts a lot of people that are employed there in a panic that they're going to get replaced because the job they do was being done by where this new director is coming from by somebody they know, and they're going to bring them over and replace you. So their goal at that point was to make everybody look bad except for them. So this is where it kind of felt like high school again, like a popularity contest and gossiping. Except these aren't 15-year-olds, these are 45, 55-year-old people behaving in a very immature and barbaric manner. And again, I was surprised by this and not prepared for it. And they said, we need the new director's coming in and we need all the computer asset inventoried. So we need you to visit every single workstation and document what CPU it has, how much memory it has, what size hard drive it has. I go, no. What do you mean no? I don't have time for that. And furthermore, if I do this and then something comes up missing, I'm going to be held accountable and responsible for that. So I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. They said, you can't tell me you're not doing it. I said, I can tell you I'm not doing it because it's not in the contract. They said, well, the contract doesn't say you won't do it. So you know how a contract works, right? The contract doesn't list all the things I'm not going to do, or we'd have a contract that stretches around the earth. The contract states what I am going to do. That's not in the contract. I cannot be in two places at the same time, and I'm not willingly going to accept responsibility for inventory. I'm not doing it. So things started getting bad. And I said to my boss, I said, you need to come down to APS. This was ADEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality. I want you to meet with the two bosses with me to discuss what they want and what I need to do it, because we're not getting far here. So the boss comes down. This was at the end of the day. I have the second in command, this guy Lonnie. I'm just going to call him Lonnie because that was his name. And this guy, boy, he was a backstabber like you wouldn't believe. He was, if you've ever seen the movie Office Space, he's the guy that'll smile at you and say things like, yeah, we're going to start we're going to come in on Sunday this weekend, and we're going to start at the usual time at 9 a.m. So we'll see you then. Like, no. That's what he'd do. It's just this passive aggressive, yeah, it's not really something you can say no to, so we'll see you at the usual time. And then he'd just walk away. This is the guy that would tell me, I hear you're talking negatively about the IT department. Oh, how are you hearing that? Is somebody telling you, or are you eavesdropping on my phone calls? Yeah, well, it'd be great if you just wouldn't do that anymore, okay? What kind of guy? Hate that guy. So I had him and I had my boss from Infinicis there. And I said, look, they want me to do all these other things. They're not in the contract. I haven't had a raise in over a year. And I need some help. I either need to get paid more to do this extra work, or you need to bring somebody in. You know, you're going to need two people here. And he said, that's, having two people here isn't in the budget. So, well, there's only one of me, and you give me a raise. Do that. No, it's not in the budget to give you a raise. Okay. So the guy from DEQ, he left the room, and it was just me and the boss privately. He goes, listen, I don't care what they ask you to do. I don't care if it's in the contract or not in the contract. I'm paying you your $12 an hour regardless. So, I mean, if they want you to go wash their car, go wash their car. You're still going to make $12 an hour. I said, really? That's your attitude? He goes, yeah. What's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with it is I'm trying to exercise my skills that I already have while obtaining new skills that are related so that I can continue to move up in my career. And washing cars isn't helping me do that. So that doesn't really work for me. He goes, well, I don't know what else to tell you. I said, all right. I said, I appreciate you taking the time to come and see me. And I remember doing this because I basically very professionally dismissed him in the way that I was dismissed by others. I said, I appreciate you taking your time to visit with me today. Have a nice evening. And I dismissed him. And he left. And then I called in sick for the next 3 days because if you didn't use sick time, you lost it. So I was accruing these hours that were entitled to me. And then at about 2 o'clock in the morning on a late Saturday, I called the office, called my boss, got his voicemail at the office and said, hey, this is Kerry. I want to let you know I've accepted another position with another company and I will not be coming in anymore. This is my termination. I'm officially quitting as of right now. No notice. So Monday morning came and I thought, he'll call me, right? He'll call me because he'll want to work this out. They don't have anybody to put there, and if they do put somebody there, they won't know how to do the job, and nobody there can teach them. Nope, didn't call me. So I got a call a couple days later from a tech I used to work with at Infosys, and she says, can you tell me how to do this? And I said, look, you know I like you. I consider us to be friends. But the whole point of me leaving was to underscore that nobody else knows how to do the job. And if they don't have it in the budget to give me a raise, they don't have it in the budget to bring me somebody else to do the work, but the Department of Environmental Quality keeps wanting to add more work on, and I'm just supposed to accept that? I go, the whole point of me leaving without anybody trained was to send a message. So I'm sorry if that puts you in a bad position, but it's not me putting you in that position. The bosses know you and I know each other. That's probably why you were selected for this job, knowing that you were going to call me. And if you never want to talk to me again and you're not going to be my friend anymore, I mean, that's your call, but I cannot help you. But you can let the boss know. He's got my phone number if he wants to work it out. Because the truth is, I didn't have another job. I was raised in such a way that dignity and integrity were more important than money. And every employer I've ever worked for acts like you need them more than they need you. Well, about 6 months after that happened, I don't know what happened, but I can only imagine that they were unable to fulfill their contractual obligation with this government entity. And the government entity was then no longer able to be productive. They had, I'm imagining, computers backed up like crazy, people unable to work, and the company I worked for, Infosys, they filed for bankruptcy. 6 months later, they're gone. I wonder if maybe they were sued, and as a result of that, obviously, I mean, they've got no defense. How do you cannot, they could put an employee on site, that's no problem, but the employee wouldn't have any idea how to do what needed to be done. And none of the people that worked for the Department of Environmental Quality knew how to train anybody because they didn't know themselves. I hope that I was teaching a lesson. I hope that I was teaching the people that were in charge that if you think you're smarter than me, then you do my job. You do it. If you think that you can boss me around and treat me like I'm your slave, guess what? I can quit. This is not the Army. It's not illegal for me to quit. Not in the state of Arizona. It's a right to work state. You can be fired at any time for any reason, and you can quit at any time for any reason. No notice is required. And the message I hoped to send was that these people were going to learn a lesson, that threatening me was not a way to motivate me. Throwing your weight around because you're in charge of this government entity, so therefore you're in charge of me when I don't work for you, I work for a contractor. Trying to emphasize there's a line there, right? There's a difference between being an employee and being a contractor. Primarily the difference is benefits, healthcare, vacation, sick time, all that comes with, and a government employee. It's pretty hard to lose a job. You have to screw up pretty badly to lose a government job. So there's really good job security, which is just not comparable to any other job you could get. A government job is the best job security type of job you can get in the United States right now. So whether or not I had anything to do with that company filing for bankruptcy, I'll never know. But I do know that the employees, when they filed bankruptcy, none of those employees got their last paychecks. None of them. The creditors that they owed millions of dollars to didn't get their money either. So I got out of there pretty much just in time. Microage, the company that I told you about with APS, they went out of business. They were, like I say, bought out by Compaq, got out of there. And Infinisys, which was bought out by Intercom filed for bankruptcy 20 months later. Just 20 months later, they were gone. So dodged a lot of bullets. A lot of people thought I was nuts to leave a job when I didn't have a job to go to. But I was living in my mother's house at the time. I had the whole house to myself. And if I couldn't make the rent that month, it was going to be okay. My mom would help me out. So in a way, I had an entitlement. I had a benefit that most people didn't have, where I wasn't going to get kicked out on the street. So I always took a job like a rich person. I'm working not because I need the money, but because I want to work. And if I was a millionaire, a multimillionaire, I would want to work. But that doesn't mean you get to take advantage of me. You don't get to say, well, you don't need the money, so we're only going to give you $2 an hour. No. You pay me a fair wage. You don't pay me any more, and you don't pay me any less. I want fairness. Fairness has always been very, very important to me. And as a result of these experiences, and again, this isn't all of my experiences, but just sharing these few with you has kept me on now for an hour and a half, just for what is effectively, 4 employers: Tristar, Naga Systems, APS, and Department of Environmental Quality. The job at the Department of Environmental Quality was the one that was the most shocking to me with regards to the abusive nature of the people in charge. My theory was these were people who were teased and beat up a lot in high school. Like, you look at these people, and these people, I don't know the word for it. You knew they weren't the cool kids. And I think they carried this resentment with them and put themselves in an illusionary position of power, which outside of the building, they had no power at all. But inside of that building, they were feared. I remember a week after I had left the Department of Environmental Quality, I was pretty good friends with the receptionist. And I said, what are they saying about me being gone? And she goes, they said they fired you. And I said, well, yeah, I guess if you stop showing up to work every day and tell them you quit, they don't have any choice but to fire you. And all 3 of the main bosses that worked for the government said that they fired me. None of them admitted the truth of what happened. And yet they all suffered the consequences. So in other words, by not having anybody there who knew how to do the job, they weren't able to get anything done. So you can forget about your inventory control. You can forget about your fishbowl idea. You have bigger problems now. Now you can't even get a simple workstation up and running. And as more new workstations arrive, you can't just put them in place. They have to be configured, but nobody knew how they were configured. And nobody, not one person, picked up the phone, and particularly from the company I work for at Infinicis, go, listen, what would it take to bring you back? What would it take? They never made that phone call. Their pride and their ego was more important than making sure the contractual obligations were met. And as a result, I believe, as a result of that, or as a result of a pattern of that style of behavior, that company was no longer sustainable and filed for bankruptcy. Vanstar, bought by Intercom, which then bought it, filed for bankruptcy. Microage filed for bankruptcy or was on the verge of it when they were bought by Compaq. It's the same story over and over and over and over and over again. Entex was bought out. They filed for bankruptcy and then they started the company again. And I had gone and reapplied. And they wanted somebody to do on-site. And I said, knowing Infinicis, the company I had previously worked for was 1/10 the size. Infinicis had like 12 company vehicles for their employees to use for on-site work. So Entex was like 10 times bigger. And I said, so you have company cars for that? And they said, no, you'll use your own vehicle and we'll pay you whatever the IRS claims is your mileage, whatever that 20 cents a mile, whatever it was. Probably wasn't that much back then. And I said, well, it's not going to work for me. And they said, what do you mean it's not going to work for you? I said, well, if you're going to pay me per mile, regardless of what kind of car I drive, why would I use my nice new car to represent your company when I could go buy a $300 car to make money from it? I could buy a $300 car with no working air conditioning that drips oil, and I'll still get paid the same amount of money. So I'm going to pull up into your client's parking lot with this jalopy that's smoking and dripping oil. I'm going to be sweating in 110-degree weather with sweat stains all over my outfit. And I'm going to say, hi, my name is Carrie. I'm here from Entex to service your computers. That's what you want, representing your company? And she goes, well, of course not. I go, well, that's why the company needs to provide a company vehicle. Because it doesn't make sense for me to depreciate my new car for your benefit. I might as well buy an old cheap car and make money off of it. Needless to say, I didn't get that job. I remember I went to a nursery, not for kids, but for plants. And they interviewed me and they said, the boss doesn't care what hours you work or how many days you work. But at the end of the year, raises are based on how many average hours you worked per week. So the boss likes to see 50 hours a week. If you put in 50 hours a week, I'm almost guaranteed to get a raise every year. And I said, well, this isn't the right job for me. Now remember, the attitude of employers, and I don't know what it is now, but at that time, the attitude was, we're offering you money, how can you say no? What? Nobody says no. I said, look, this doesn't make any sense. I need a job that's going to evaluate me based on my performance of how much I actually got done, not on how long it took me to get it done. You're basically promoting incompetence. She's like, excuse me? I said, look, let's say I know what I'm doing and I can get this thing done, this particular job, I can get it done in 2 hours. Well, this other guy has no clue what he's doing. He's incompetent. It takes him 12 or 20 hours. You don't know the difference. You don't know how long it's supposed to take. All you know is, man, that guy that worked 20 hours, he needs a raise because look at how dedicated he is. But the guy who got it done efficiently and quickly, he doesn't get a raise? No, this isn't, no, thank you, have a nice day. And so this was a constant pattern I saw over and over and over and over again that eventually led me to be self-employed. And I'll tell you something, being self-employed, you still have these situations. I had a client tell me, I went over to his home. I think he was a lawyer, really nice home, and consulted with him about a computer. And this guy was from New York, he kind of didn't have a filter, it was a different culture than what I'm accustomed to here in Phoenix. And normally I don't even pay much attention to that, but it plays into the story. we had made an appointment. We were going to order parts, and I said I needed half of the money down before I got started. Well, why do you need that? I go, well, I've had too many people back out on me or change their mind, and I need to know that, you know, that you're serious. And I'm not a big company. I can't finance you. So if you want me to build the computer, I need at least half of the money up front, and then the other half when I deliver the machine. And he says, okay, let's get together Tuesday at 5, whatever it was. I said, great. And he goes, no, you know what? I'm busy Tuesday. Be here Wednesday at 2. I go, no, you can't just tell me to be there Wednesday at 2. I have other clients. You can't just. He goes, I didn't. I go, you did. This is what I like about email. You can look at the message that you wrote me just below and see what you wrote. He says, are you insane? He said, I was just suggesting Wednesday at 2. It doesn't have to be Wednesday at 2. It could be Wednesday at 3. I go, look, you're not getting it. I'm not available on Wednesday. You didn't even ask. And he's like, what did somebody do to you? You have like daddy issues? I go, what? I go, I have other clients. You need to tell me what days you have available. I'll tell you what days I have. You know what? This isn't going to work. Goodbye. And I go, and this is why I need 50% down. This is exactly why. And the guy hung up on me. And then he sent me an email that says, don't ever contact me or my wife again. No problem. So it's not as though becoming self-employed suddenly gets rid of all the politics and unnecessary drama. It's just, it makes a little bit more sense, but you understand why it happened and how it happened. Whereas in a big corporation, things don't necessarily make any sense. It just is what it is, and you have to accept it or quit. They don't pay you to think in a corporation, and they don't pay you to care. And it's one of the things I learned, at least here in Arizona, is employers do not pay you to care. If anything, they don't want you to care. They want you to do what you're told, put in as many hours as possible. If you get sick or you can't work for any reason, they want to cut you loose like a broken tool and replace you with a new tool. There's no sort of taking care of the employees anymore. You know, Intel even saw their employees as a revenue stream by selling them broken processors. With the Pentium flaw that came out, they took all those bad Pentium chips and they turned them into jewelry. They had earrings and keychains, and they had a little catalog, and you could order from within the catalog to sell it to their employees. They didn't give it away. This was a money-making revenue stream for them. And again, I was brought up where you worked for a company for 30 years and you got a gold watch and you had your own office, you know, with a door and a phone and a picture of your family. There were no cubicles. That wasn't a world I was ever taught about. Walking into Intel for the first time and seeing a sea of cubicles as far as the eye can see. And each one has a pole coming down labeled by letter and by number. Like vertically there's a letter and horizontally there's a number, like an Excel spreadsheet. So if you told you had to go to cubicle A3, you had to find it like a parking lot, finding your car in a parking lot, and that was your desk or that was the workstation you had to go work on. That was not prepared. I was not prepared, or that wasn't taught to me in school. This was a world I'd never experienced before. And so again, by sharing this information with you, I hope that you have a better idea of how the corporate world works, or at least how it used to work. I don't know, it's been a long time since I've been working in the corporate environment. So things may have changed a bit, but you know, like I say, human nature is still human nature, and it really hasn't changed at all when it comes to that. And I would very much be interested in hearing your nightmarish stories, whether it's you're self-employed and you've had nightmarish clients, and we all have, or you're working or have worked for an employer that something very unjust was done and you were just told too bad. I would love to hear your stories. And what you can do is you can use your cell phone to make a video, tell your story, upload it to YouTube, send me a link or put a link to your video in the comments below this video. And I want to share that with everybody. And you know, I'm told there are these great companies to work for. I'm told. I've never found one. I've met friends that have had great stories to tell of the companies they worked for. A friend of mine was in Intel 15 years, loved his job, and they let him go. He didn't do anything wrong. They just let him go. And it was weird that companies would let people go because they claim it wasn't in their budget. And then they would hire some of them back as contractors. And contractors generally get paid twice as much as an employee because you have to pay your own taxes and you have to provide your own benefits and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So it didn't make sense to us that you would fire this guy that you were paying $50,000 a year to and hire him back at $100,000 a year as a contractor. It was very strange. Intel did it, APS did it. It's a weird political thing that's played with perhaps tax loopholes and other things that are at work that have nothing to do with the loyalty, the dedication, or the hard work of the employee. It doesn't even play into it. When I was working at Intel, the boss at one time to me, when we were discussing my raise and how I was upset that I'd been waiting and nobody, you promised it and you won't give it, basically said, well, not basically, he said, I can replace you like this. Techs are a dime a dozen, so tread carefully. And I said, well, companies with your attitude are a dime a dozen. I can get another job like this tomorrow. Not much of a loss. So having an adversarial relationship with your employer is not ideal. We're all on the same page. We're all trying to get the job done. And it is really unfortunate when people think their pride and their ego take precedent over what you're there to do. They're looking for somebody to obey them as though they're a sergeant or someone in the military and you're a private. It's not the way it is. And they act as though, we'll just fire you and you won't have any money. Guess what? You're not the only employer. And like I said, I've always taken a job as though I didn't need the money. It's always been my attitude. And I've been very fortunate that I've been able to walk out of places where things have been unjust. And my father would tell me, you shouldn't burn bridges. I said, Dad, there's no bridge. The company doesn't exist anymore. I'd understand, so my dad comes from an era where people did work for 30 years for the company and get a gold watch. So it doesn't work this way. These companies, if they don't go out of business, they're bought out by another company. The person you worked for, who would be your reference, after 6 months or a year, they're not even going to be with that company anymore, even if the company's still around, let alone if the company had been bought out or filed for bankruptcy. There's no worry about burning bridges. There's no bridge. It doesn't exist. And it just goes to show that times have changed from, say, the era of the 50s, 60s, and 70s when my dad was working at more of the traditional type jobs. And my mother would stay at home and raise the kids. That was how it was. In the 70s, when I was growing up, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad refused to allow his wife to work. It was a sense of pride. If you needed your wife to work, then you weren't a man. You weren't able to support your family, that your wife had to work. And in a way, as politically incorrect as it is, in a way, I still think that's better for the family as a whole. I appreciate having my mom around all day. She would take me to school, or I would say goodbye to her in the morning, and I would come home and she would be home. And she very much had a hand in raising me. It wasn't as though I was either home alone by myself or being raised by a nanny, not that we could afford a nanny, or being sent to some after-school thing to bide time until parents got home from work. That did happen later in the 80s, but at that point I was a teenager, so I liked my time alone, so I was fine with it. But yeah, that's how it was. And so my dad's attitude was, what are you doing for you to have so many jobs? You should have one job and you should work it for 30 years, was my dad's attitude. What are you doing? How are you so uncooperative that you go from one job to the next job to the next job, and then you complain about how terrible it is? What's wrong with you? I'm like, this is just not the way the world is anymore, Dad. And so my dad ended up getting a job. He was self-employed for a long time, and he ended up getting a job with a free newspaper called The Penny Saver. And he was very lucky in that the job was located just a mile from the house, so he didn't have to deal with the frustrations of traffic I had been constantly complaining about. It was getting worse and worse and worse. I can't even imagine what it would be like to endure a 32-mile drive in rush hour traffic from here to Intel today, knowing how much Phoenix has grown in that time, and how much longer that trip would take. Thank goodness this happened in the 90s, and it's not happening today. So my dad got this job with with Penny Saver, and he was just it was a mile from the house, and he finally got to experience what I'd been trying to explain to him that he didn't believe. He finally got to experience it firsthand. And so what happened was, they were doing a very important software update for Y2K. So for those of you who don't know, in 1999, there was a big public fear driven by the media that computers had a date issue that they couldn't tell, the 19 from 1900s from the 2000s. They're only looking at the last 2 digits, and software has to be updated and recoded or the software may stop working because it'll work backwards. It'll think that something's 80 years old. If it sees the 20 on there, or if it sees 2001, if it sees 01, it's going to think it's 1901. And so it's going to compare it to the date. It's going to say negative 99 years. Anyway, so things will stop working, grocery stores may not function, and your cell phone may stop working, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And so there were people that would, prep. They're preppers. You'd have all these cans of food, and they'd have a cabin up north, and the news would interview them about how they're prepared for Y2K and really drive this fear home. But the whole time I was saying, you don't have to worry about this. This is not a consumer problem. This is a business problem. In other words, if the grocery store down the street has a Y2K problem where they can't open the grocery store because the cash registers don't work, then go to the other grocery store. If your cell phone stops working, go to the other cell phone carrier who is working. This was never a consumer problem. This was a business problem. So while my dad was working doing the software upgrade to Y2K, he was part of a team, and there was this other team, right? His team got the project done. And my father's boss says to him, I need you to come in on the weekend and help the other team get up to speed. They're way behind. And my dad said, I have company from out of town coming this weekend. If you had given me more notice, I could do that. But this is Friday. You can't tell me to come in on Saturday and Sunday. On Friday, I've got company coming in. I said, well, aren't you a team player? And I was like, when my dad was telling me this story, I was like, finally he's getting a taste of the world, of what I've been explaining to him and complaining about. He's getting it firsthand. And I was curious, how's my father going to respond? So my father says, I have no problem being a team player. If you had given me notice, I would have adjusted my schedule accordingly. But I've made plans with family coming in, and I cannot take time away from that family. And furthermore, why are you punishing me because I did my project on time? Me and my team did our job. And the people who didn't do their job, you're rewarding them for being incompetent by having us come in and do the job for them. And they said, oh, you have a really bad attitude. He goes, I don't have a bad attitude. He said, you're punishing the people who do the work and rewarding the people who don't. And then you're telling me last minute I should cancel plans with my family that are coming in from out of town to continue to reward these folks in this other team who should be at the same pace we are with that our team was on, that my team was on. Well, that was the first of many such political type things that occurred to him. And every time one would happen, I would just nod my head and go, yep, that's what I'm talking about. Now here we are, it's 2018, and I haven't worked for a corporation for about 17 years. I've worked as an independent consultant to these companies, but not as an employee. And I would be very curious for those of you who are working in that corporate environment, if anything's different today or if it's still more of the same. So again, I would encourage you, if you have your great tales from the trenches, tech tales from the trenches, that's what we'll call it. Love to hear your stories. We've had so many stories from fellow employees and such that we would go out on site. Like I said, when we did the Dell or HP or Compaq support that we did, stories of, guy went over to the client and went to pick the computer up and there were boogers all underneath the computer, just dried, crusted boogers. And the employee was like, I'm not touching this until you get it cleaned up, and left. stories of people walking into homes, usually self-employed people, usually putting an ad on Craigslist, walking in where somebody's got a dog or a cat, and there's literally dog poop and cat poop on the floor in piles. Just watch your step. Stories of I don't know. There's a lot of them. It's hard for me to pick one right now. There's so many. I love hearing these stories, though. I love it because it helps make people aware of what's potentially possible when you do certain types of marketing. So, for example, marketing to Craigslist, you're going to get people who want you to do the most amount of work for the least amount of money. That's a generalization, but for the most part, the people that are on Craigslist are looking for a deal, right? So if you're going to start your own business and you're thinking I'll advertise on Craigslist because it's free, you're going to get the wrong kind of customer. And what ends up happening is you say, well, I need any customer. I'm self-employed, I'll take anything. Bad mistake. There's an old expression that if you accept nothing but the best, that's quite often what you'll get, which I think means nothing or the best. When you take the attitude that I need the money, so I'll take on the job, you open yourself to being taken advantage of. People will, it's not uncommon, can sense it about you and will push you to do more and more and not give you anything back in return for it. And there's this whole 80-20 rule in business where 80% of your profit comes from just 20% of your customers, and 80% of your time is spent with 20% of your customers. These people that will just wring you out for everything they can get out of you. They'll make you feel sorry for them. They'll tell you how, they'll tell you about their health problems. They'll tell you about their financial problems. They'll give you all the reasons why they don't have any money, but at the same time are demanding that you come to their house and service their computer on site, which is something only somebody with money would do, right? Well, there's Jimmy. And of course, you can't tell that to them. You can't say, you can't go out to a restaurant and order food and then not pay for it because you don't have any money. It doesn't work that way. And I found that when you're self-employed, people will tend to think it's not as important to pay you. So I had this discussion on Tech Vets with Mike Smith a while back where he had a client that wasn't paying him and owed him quite a bit of money and claimed that they were having financial problems. And I said, well, was the power on in their building? And he says, yeah, of course the power was on. Well, they had money to pay the electric bill, didn't they? He goes, well, that's a good point. I go, yeah, because they know if they don't pay that bill, they're going to cut off the power. But if they don't pay you, what's going to happen? He says, well, what's happening is they're asking me to come in and do more work. And I don't know what to do. I said, don't do the work. I said, if you need to have a cutoff point where people can owe you a certain amount of money. And I'm just talking labor now. We're not even talking parts. When you're just talking about your time, you need a cutoff point. And it varies depending on if it's a new client, if it's an older client that you know and have a history with. But you have to set that and go, look, the most amount of credit I'm going to give a client is this much. And beyond that, I can't do any more work. I'm stuck. No differently than the power company. If they don't get their money, they're cutting the power off. They don't care what your sob story is. They don't care. You have to operate your business the same way they do. So basically, he calls the company and says, I'd love to come out and help you. If you have a check for me for the amount that's due, I'll be right out. But otherwise, until we're caught up with the debt, there's nothing more I can do. And it wasn't easy for him. And for the most part, people that work as techs, it doesn't come natural to us. We want to help. So what we do, we care and we want to help. And there are people in the world, more so now than I think 20 or 30 years ago, that work the system. They're looking how they can gain, and it doesn't matter what it costs you. They don't care. All they care about is what their gain is. And part of your job of being self-employed is to be able to use your judgment and determine this very quickly, hopefully in the phone call, the initial phone call that you get. You can often, these people have red flags that'll come up. And you're much better off, in my opinion, to turn those people down or to raise your rate to such a level that would make it worth dealing with them. I don't like to tell anybody no. So what I would rather do is say, I'm thinking to myself, this person's going to be a pain in my butt. what would it be worth? It's not worth my regular rate. It would have to be more than that. So I'll make it triple. So I want $375 to come out on site. $375? Yeah. Well, that's too much money. Well, I'm sorry, that's what I charge. Now, I'm not the one saying no, they are, and I don't feel bad about it. But if they agree to it, then I'm more willing to put up with their nonsense and to put up with their, I had a lady call me the other day. I worked on her computer one time. She says, my daughter came over and she turned my computer off and I don't know how to turn it back on. Well, she's not on a retainer. I don't remember what her computer looks like. I don't know where the power button is. So I call her back, which I really shouldn't have done. And I said, the lights aren't on the computer? She goes, no, I've tried all 3 buttons. I go, there's not 3 buttons on a computer. Are you talking about your screen? She goes, yeah. I go, well, your screen isn't your computer. She goes, well, whatever. How do I turn it on? I go, I don't know. You hit the power button. How you turn on your TV? How you turn on the light switch? Wasn't that something you can log in remotely and do? I go, no, I can't. I said, I wish I could open your refrigerator door remotely, but I can't. You have to push the power button. I said, if you want me to drive over to your place and hit the power button for you, it's $125 because I've got a half an hour in the car to get to your place and a half an hour in the car to get back home. So at least an hour of my time is being consumed. Now, if you want to pay me to do that, I'll do it. But if you have a neighbor or a friend you can have come over your house and turn that on for you, that would save you $125. Okay, I'll call you back if I need you. Okay. That is one of the frustrating parts about being self-employed is answering your own phone. A doctor doesn't answer his own phone. A mechanic usually doesn't answer his own phone. You usually have a secretary or what do we call them today, administrative assistant, somebody who just schedules appointments, who acts as a gatekeeper. I see the word gatekeeper in the chat. Somebody who keeps, just like a doctor, because this is what people do. Hey, Carrie, I just have a real quick question. And you answer it, which leads them to another question, and another question, and another question. And it's hard to not be rude and say, we've been on the phone for 20 minutes now, answering your one question. You're not a regular client. I've serviced your computer months ago, one time. And I have to start billing you for this. If you want to continue this, I have never figured out a polite way to bring this up. But what I'm trying to get out is that you're taking me away from other people's. I'm being paid to do a job right now, and you're interrupting that, asking me free questions. And I'm answering your questions because I don't know if this is going to lead to an appointment for scheduling work, or if you're just trying to squeeze information out of me and waste my time. So at some point you have to cut the client off. And I've never figured out a polite way to do this by saying, if you'd like to continue this conversation, you need to pay. And it never comes out right, and it always upsets the customers. But then I think, well, I don't want those kind of customers anyway. I still don't want to be the bad guy, And that's why I wish I had somebody to answer the phone for me. But the job doesn't pay me enough to afford to pay somebody to do that. But, oh man, it would be great to just have somebody who goes, look, I can't answer your questions. I'm not a computer person. I'm the office manager, and I can schedule Carrie to come out. Would you like to make an appointment? That would make a huge difference in my world. And there are services that do that, by the way. There are services specifically for IT where they can answer the most basic questions for your customers, but they're going to bill you for it, right? So you still have to figure out a way to bill your clients to make it certain that they know that if you want to ask these questions, you have to pay this money, which will entitle you to, a few months or a few weeks or a year, whatever you devise, a fee that gives you, call us whenever you need us for $30 a month, something like that. And we'll whatever we can do over the phone, we'll do for $30 a month, anytime you need us. And then, of course, anything that we have to come on site and fix, that's at the regular rate. And if you don't do that, if you continue to be the nice guy or gal and feel bad for these people and do your best to answer their questions, then you could end up being very resentful that you spent an 8-hour day, a big portion of it, making no money at all. And you've got to pay your cell phone bill, right? That these people are using to call you. They're using your cell phone for your business that you're paying for to ask you how to do stuff for free. And it's hard sometimes to determine who's trying to just get information and who's trying to determine if they need to schedule an appointment or not. Because sometimes people are like, yeah, I don't know if this is a big enough deal to pay you to come out and fix, or if this is something I can take care of myself. And it's a tough part of being self-employed, which, when I was working at Intel and APS, I never had to deal with that. I had my job, I didn't have to worry about finding the work. That's the hardest part of being self-employed. And it doesn't matter what you do for a living. It doesn't matter if you're a chef that started your own restaurant. You could be the best chef in the world and even have the best prices. But if nobody knows you exist, how are you going to get any business? Where's the business come from? And I think that's one of the biggest frustrations I get is people will email me and they'll ask me, how do you get customers? That's what every business that ever existed wants to know. You do marketing, whatever kind of marketing you want to do. You can go door to door and drop off flyers, cold call people, whatever. Join the Chamber of Commerce, join a referral group. There's no guaranteed way. You just have to risk it and try and be ready for a bunch of being turned down over and over and over again. It sucks. When I had the temp service being paid by the contractor who was being paid by the client, I had 3 hands on my paycheck. And I thought, why aren't I getting the whole check? I'm the one doing the work. But what I later found out is it's not the doing the work that's the hard part. It's finding the work. And that's the big difference between working for somebody else and working for yourself. So with that, just any questions anybody has in the chat. And by the way, hello to everybody watching. Happy Saturday. And let me just come over here and see what we've got going on. I see Sir Hibbler and Robert Jones, R.E. Hill, Lance Riplinger, Andrew Storm, Brett Kennedy. Hi guys, welcome in. Risk about getting sued, is that a problem? Not so much. A lot of people will threaten to sue. I've probably been threatened to be sued 100 times. Nobody's ever sued me, not once, because I'm confident in what I'm doing. I have sued other businesses myself. I actually only sued one business, not multiple. And I won that case. And it's got to be. You have to understand that to sue somebody, it costs money. You have to have them served. And it doesn't do any good to sue somebody if you can't serve them. I would be a very difficult person to serve because I don't have a schedule. You won't see me leave my house at a certain time or come home at a certain time. And if I'm not expecting somebody, I don't answer my door. So a process server would have a very, very difficult time. Even if the sheriff came knocking on the door, you're not obligated to answer the door. No law says you have to answer the door. And they can't serve you unless they are face to face and hand you the paperwork. So, but beyond that, of all the people that have threatened to sue, nobody has ever sued. So people talk a big game and I would welcome it. If anybody wanted to sue me, bring it on, because I'm very confident that what I do is right, And when I say right, I mean morally and ethically. Barry Allman says, hi, Carrie from the UK. Did you ever build a computer? This is from Aberus84 in the chat. Did you ever build a computer you later wished you didn't, i.e. Having a difficult customer? Yes, absolutely. This ties into another comment about the customer's always right. What happened to that? I had been burned once before on a computer that I had built. That customer was a pain in my butt. And I don't really remember the specifics anymore, but I can tell you what it resulted in. This client that I had wanted to build this computer that was complicated. And I said, I won't build that for you. And he said, what? What do you mean? I'm telling you what I want. I'm the customer. Your job is to give me what I want, and then I pay you for it. I go, no, it doesn't work like that. I go, you don't walk into a doctor's office and tell the doctor, give me some Vicodin, give me some OxyContin. It doesn't work like that. So then the person is outraged. Oh, suddenly you're as important as a doctor? What an ego you have. It's not about ego, nothing to do with that. What it's about is you're asking me to build a computer that I know is going to be rife with reliability issues, and I'll be obligated to cover that under warranty. And I can tell you a system like this is going to be a nightmare to support, and I will lose money on it. So I won't build it. What I would recommend is we build it this way without all this extra stuff, because you don't have any plans to use this extra stuff anytime soon, right? So what I'm saying is when you're ready to start using these other things, let's add them as you need them. Besides, with technology, the prices are always going down. So when you want to use this tape drive, let's get you a tape drive when you're ready to start backing things up. You're not ready for that yet. You won't be using it, and you're going to pay top dollar for it. And tapes are extraordinarily unreliable. It's a horrible way to back up. They make a lot of noise. The magnetic tape is again, it's very unreliable. It's slow, it's noisy. And I've seen a lot of these tape drives at this time, back then, I said a lot of these tape drives go bad. You may find out the first time you go to use it, it doesn't work. So let's put that in when you're ready to start using it. And then slowly over time, we'll build up to that configuration. No, I want it all ready so that when I'm ready, it's ready. I go, well, tech doesn't work that way. You may find out that when you're ready, the tech doesn't work anymore or isn't configured the way you need it to be configured. You just can't have it ready. And I ended up building the system the way I wanted to build it. And they never called me back to have me upgrade it to do any of the things that they said they were going to do, because they never did it. It wasn't that they went to somebody else. They never went forward, and this is what I see a lot of. People will say that all the time. I live in an area with a lot of seniors, and I hear this is going to be the last computer I'll ever buy, because they're old and they figure they'll be dead before they need a new computer. And I reminded one of my clients that he's told that to me 3 times. I go, this is the 3rd computer that I built for you. When he said, for the 3rd time, this will be the last computer that I buy. I go, I'm pretty sure you're going to outlive me. Have you ever built any other tech besides computers? Yeah, I used to do car stereo installations and home alarm installations. What's your thoughts and experience with Alienware? Alienware's sort of its own entity. So anytime you have a problem with Alienware, you contact Alienware, and they should be able to take care of you. They were bought by Dell, but from what I understand, they've maintained their separate existence. I don't know if they ever changed that. But I would suggest that when you buy from a big manufacturer like that, especially a high-end specialty computer like what Alienware makes, that you don't do anything to it. You don't have anybody do anything to it. You deal with Alienware for the life of that computer. In my opinion, when you enter into that sort of a configuration at that type of hardware, it's not that you can't. It's just if you're somebody who is averse to building your own system and you're going to go buy a high-end gaming system like Alienware, then you should go to Alienware for all your help and support. Or you should build it yourself. But you shouldn't try and mix those two together, not in my opinion. Are you done dealing with the Malwarebytes fallout yet? That Malwarebytes fallout was something that occurred over the course of about, I'd say, 4 days. It started on day 1 and it was over by day 4. Whatever the fallout was after day 4 had no impact on me whatsoever. So Mr. Dell will tell you it's his way or the highway, and so it should be. Mr. Dell's a lot more successful than you and I. If you're working for him, you do what he tells you to do, and you'd be best advised to take notes. If you want to be as successful as he is, you got to do things the way he does them. Have you seen anything with Windows Update disabling USB? I read a couple of things online. There is an update apparently on Windows 10 that caused some systems USB to stop working, but I haven't had any customers experience that. Just a couple things I've read online. And for all I know, it's one guy. Could be the one guy I read online is the same guy asking the question in the chat room. I don't know that it's multiple people. Presumably it is, but none of my customers have been affected. None of my systems have been affected. What do you think about Origin PC laptops? I don't. Have you ever seen illegal files on a computer? And if so, what did you do? Yeah, on occasion I run into pirated copies of Microsoft Office or Windows, and I just let the customer know that they will need to purchase a licensed copy. I cannot jeopardize my relationship with Microsoft because the customer is too cheap to buy Windows. I can't throw away my career to help a customer. It doesn't make any sense. If the customer refuses to buy a copy of Windows, I simply return the computer to them, no charge. I won't charge them. There you go. I'd rather take the money you were going to pay me and buy yourself a legal copy of Windows. Have a nice day. When was the last time a customer asked for a floppy disk reader for their system? 10 years ago, maybe? And even then, it was kind of surprising. What I advise people to do now is to just go on Newegg or Amazon and you can order a USB to floppy drive, a USB floppy drive. No big deal. Will you do more of these types of videos? Well, I mean, my history isn't going to change. So once I've told you my history, apart from little stories here and there that perhaps I've forgotten or didn't think of doing, I don't know that I have enough to fill up another full show, but I wouldn't say no. After an update on Windows 10, the start menu stopped working. Have you seen this happen before? No, I have not. So I think what people do, there are people that won't run antivirus. They don't think they need it. And what they don't realize is that viruses and malware, when they're written well, you don't know they're on your system. So when you say I don't get viruses, I know how to surf safely, so I don't have antivirus. These are the people that are the ones that's generally, more times than not, they're the ones that go ahead of Windows Update, and this happened. Have you ever heard of that happening? And probably what happened is your system's infected with something. And it's not necessarily a problem with the Windows Update, but that your system was already sick and the update killed it. Or you have perhaps a bad memory module or a bad hard drive and files are getting corrupted and you just weren't aware of it. So you've got to make sure you don't have any pre-existing conditions. Now in these days where the updates are happening automatically, it's not like you could really prepare for an update like we used to. You could go and run CCleaner and get rid of your temp files and make sure you have enough hard drive space and make sure you run Malwarebytes or MCSoft and clear out any malware and then do your Windows Update. So the best thing you can do, in my opinion, would be to keep your system as virus-free and as malware-free as possible, as often as possible. We know Windows Updates come out on the second Tuesday of every month, so maybe the second Monday of every month, run it through a series of second opinions, even if you're running an antivirus and an anti-malware. If you're running MCSoft, run a free scan of Malwarebytes. If you're running Malwarebytes, run a free scan with MCSoft Emergency Git. Run Spyware Doctor. Run whatever other second opinion you trust to make sure your system is clear of any malware before installing any updates. Most of these updates are not an issue with Microsoft. They're not an issue with the update. They're an issue with the end user having a system that has pre-existing conditions they're unaware of. Not always, but most of the time. Because clearly, if it's an issue with an update, you just Google it, and you'll find other people having the same problem, and then you can see what they did to solve it, and you can follow the same advice. What do you use for backup in UPS? I don't use UPSs. I find they often cause the very problem they're designed to avoid. Customers forget they have them. After 3-4 years, the batteries die, and then power will start being cut randomly while the employee is using the computer, and I get the phone call, why is my computer shutting off? And I say, you have a UPS? Yes. You need to bypass the UPS. Does that fix the problem? Yes. So I just don't recommend UPSs. Unless somebody's in an area where power gets cut a lot. Here in Phoenix, it may happen once or twice a year. Or if there's a particularly important piece of equipment like a server or a backup, a server or like a phone system, something like that, where you've got to have power to it, and certainly a backup. It's difficult to tell a small business that they need to put a backup device, a backup UPS. I keep saying the word backup. That they need to put a UPS on all their workstations because they're, about $200 a piece. If you have 10 workstations, that's $2,000. And by the way, we have to redo this every 3 years. You have to spend $2,000. You got to get like a label maker and put the date. Otherwise, nobody knows. Has it been 2 years, 3 years? I don't know. When was it? When did we buy these? Why are we replacing them when they work fine? Because we don't want to wait until they stop working. It's a difficult conversation to have with most business owners. And then if you follow the news, a lot of these batteries catch fire. Offices burn down because of batteries. What's in these UPSs? Batteries. So if the customer buys the battery to protect them from a power outage, could it cause their building to burn down? It could. So wouldn't they be better off without it? I think so. What was your most nightmarish troubleshooting? I don't know. I can tell you it would have been my own system. My own computer traditionally is harder to fix than any customer's computer. I don't know why. Windows 10 Creators Update was not compatible with my Intel graphics driver and reverted to basic driver. Not that I'm aware of. Every Intel graphics card that I know of works fine in Windows 10, but maybe you're just relying on Windows auto-detecting it, and if it doesn't detect it, you don't know what to do, and you've come to this conclusion. That's what it sounds like. Or you've got a system so old that it's not compatible with Windows 10, in which case it's time to replace the computer. Keep the operating system on it that it was designed for. Have you run into clients running Linux? No. Generally speaking, clients that run Linux take care of themselves. I'm not aware of a place that has a full-time job servicing Linux computers. I know places that sell them, but support, as far as I know, for like a mom and pop type shop, I don't think it's sustainable. People that use Linux typically use it because it's free, and they're typically people that are of the mindset that they like to play around. They're not afraid of technology. There's a big senior community, a lot of pensioners that live in Arizona where they spend 6 months of the year during the winter months here, and they're very much intimidated by technology, and Linux would be nightmarish for them. It'd be just the worst possible thing they could think of. So generally speaking, there is from a technician's point of view, there's no money to be made in Linux. It's free. It's a it's kind of a do-it-yourself operating system. It's a help-yourself operating system. And it'd be like buying, the analogy I would use, it'd be like buying a big screen TV and not having an antenna. Why would somebody do that? Or not having cable, or something to really take advantage of, to show on the screen. One goes with the other. So the Linux operating system is of a culture, the people who use that, where they want to do things themselves. They don't call people for help. They look online and they help themselves. If you want to start a business, you need to make money. The first thing that comes to mind about making money is not Linux. Carrie, I am a copier tech in LA and do see many problems you talk about. No card, no raises. That's too bad. I know the copier repair people, unfortunately, I've had some situations where copier repair people didn't have basic networking knowledge and couldn't get the copier on the network, and they had to call me, and then they changed settings on the computers in the office to talk to the copier, and in doing so lost connection with the server. So I'm sorry to say I don't have a high regard for people that do copier repair. I wish the barrier to entry was more stringent so that people that did that kind of work were of a higher caliber of knowing basic Windows networking. That's not to say you don't, but when I hear the word copier tech, I've been called out and made a lot of money from having to fix things the copier tech did. And I've gotten to a point now where I won't even touch the copier anymore. Generally, the customers, the clients that I have that have copy machines are leasing those from a corporation that supports it, and I tell them, if you have any problems with your copier, don't ask me about it. Go to the company you're paying for. One of the things that I'm always looking out to do is save my customers money. And not all customers want to save money. And I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine the other day, and he hired this employee to do some work at one of his clients. And the client wanted him to fix a QuickBooks problem. Well, if you know anything about Quicken and QuickBooks and Intuit, there's nothing you can do but call them. It's a whole lockdown system. It's all proprietary. And so he told my friend, who's his boss, he said, yeah, I didn't help them with their QuickBooks problem because they have to call QuickBooks for that. And he said, if my client wants you to fix something, you fix it. So if QuickBooks doesn't work, you get on the phone to QuickBooks and you talk to their support and you fix it. And I said, you and I have different business different business models. Your model is, if you call me, I'm going to take care of whatever it is you need taken care of, and I'm going to bill you for it. My attitude is, if it's something you can do yourself, you should do that yourself and not pay me. If it's me calling Intuit to ask them how to fix it, or it's you calling Intuit and asking them how to fix it, why would you pay me to do something you could easily do yourself? Doesn't make sense to me. I have situations where I have clients that have servers that go down. None of their employees can work. I can come in and I can fix that server and get their business back up and running. So spending my time on hold with Intuit doesn't make any sense to me. It's a waste of my time, but more importantly, it's a waste of the customer's money. But some customers want that. Some customers are like, I don't care, bill me. Unfortunately, there's only one of me. And that can consume a vast part of my day, which would leave very little opportunity for me to fix real problems that only I could fix, or somebody with a technical knowledge could fix. Anybody can call support, ask questions, and be told to follow steps. Oftentimes, Intuit will even take remote control and do the work themselves. Why would you pay me for that? So we have a little difference there, but I understand some customers don't care about the money. Those aren't my customers. My customers very much care about money. And oftentimes, I will warn a customer. I'll say, look, you can pay me to do this if you want to, but I wouldn't. I've said that. I think people appreciate that honesty. And every once in a while, you run into a business that's just like, I wasn't calling you to save money. I was calling you to get a job done. But apparently, I'm not the right guy for that job, if that's what it amounts to. Somebody asked in the chat room what a barrister is. A barrister is a lawyer. And a constable is a police officer. Carrie, what are your thoughts on all-in-one water coolers? Have you seen me use them? I don't know how else to answer that. See, John Huckabee is moderating the chat. Hi, John. He says we're talking about Barrister Global Services for contracting techs. Oh, that's the name of a company? Barrister is the name of a company? Okay, interesting. What do you think the next hard drive technology will be? Well, I still think solid state drives have a ways to go yet. Maybe someday holographic crystals, but not for a long time. Who knows? Probably something we're not even thinking of. What are your thoughts on SSD partitions and alignments? You don't have to worry about that anymore. You just need one partition, and Windows 8 and beyond automatically align the partition, so nothing to worry about. It doesn't, the aligning the partition was something more of a Windows XP issue, a little bit of a Windows 7, and it's just a performance issue. It doesn't, it's not bad for the drive, it's not harmful. It's just that it's not optimized, and without benchmarking software, you probably wouldn't tell the difference. You'd have to have a piece of software that showed you the before and after. It's pretty much all psychological, except in perhaps the most demanding of, maybe servers at Amazon or Google or something that are being constantly hit. For home users, you wouldn't know if your partition was aligned or not. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So I would suggest you find something else to occupy your mind, because that's a waste of energy. I would encourage you to forget about learning yesterday's technologies and focus on learning tomorrow's technologies, or at least today's. All that stuff from yesteryear, it'll do you no good to know that now. Do you miss Windows XP? I miss it sometimes, but my aim is getting better. What brand of all-in-one cooler would you use? Whatever you see me use in my videos is what I would use. It depends on the compatibility with the case, the type of CPU, what that CPU requires. But you'll see whatever I use in my videos, unless I say otherwise in the video, that's only what I recommend. So you only need to look at my videos and you will see the same manufacturers over and over and over again. Anything made by any of those manufacturers is a part I recommend. Beyond that, I really can't go into any more detail without really understanding what it is your needs are, what your system requirements are going to be, what your plans are with regards to overclocking, which CPU you're going to use, what kind of case you're going to use. It gets very, very complicated to answer sometimes what you think is the simplest question. Do you miss the sounds of modems connecting? No, absolutely not. Do you think in the future robots will take over your job? Sure, why not? Having a robot that could fix another robot? We'll all be just fat, lazy, diabetic, and stupid human beings, because robots will do everything for us and we will no longer know what it feels like to have a sense of accomplishment. We'll no longer have a purpose for living, and we will be in a massive depression, and we'll have everything we want at our fingertips, and therefore we will not need to do anything because it'll all be provided for us. And as a result, we will be the fattest, stupidest, most depressed, and have the shortest lifespans and be miserable. Yeah, I think that'll probably happen. Seriously. I don't think it's going to be, Terminator. I don't think the machines are going to take over. I just think human beings, I'm pretty philosophical. I've studied philosophy and psychology my whole life, trying to understand why people do the things they do, what their motivations are, and even why I do the things I do. And we're all different, but in a way we're all the same. And, there's things like dieting and exercise, things you should do and you don't want to do, and as a result of not doing it, you get worse, right? Sometimes the thing you don't want to do is the thing you really need to do. A lot of people talk about when they start going to the gym, they don't really want to go and they're kind of sore the next day, and after about a week or two, and they're doing this day after day or however often it is, suddenly when they stop going, they don't feel good and they have to go. They actually look forward to going to the gym. Once they start doing it, they don't want to stop. And if they don't feel sore the next day, they don't feel like they got a good workout. So there's an interesting psychology to the human condition where if you don't have to do anything, if you're somebody who's born into money and you don't have to work, you don't have to learn, you can see it around you. You can see the level of intelligence and the lack of ambition for people that have things handed to them that don't earn it. And it's nice to have things handed to you, don't get me wrong, but if it's done over and over and over and over and over again, things don't have any value. They don't have any meaning. Your life's purpose is just kind of blah, there's no challenges. It'd be like playing a game you could always win. After a while, why do you even want to play it anymore? It's not fun. Human beings need challenges, and we need to have accomplishments, and those sense of accomplishments is what gives us this great feeling. It's a chemical released in your brain like dopamine. It's why I like building computers. It's why I encourage everybody to do it, because when you have money, however long you saved to buy these parts, and you can screw it up if you don't do it right. So there's a little pressure. It's real. It's not virtual. This is really happening. And you put it together, and the first time you turn it on, it powers up and it works. There's a feeling nobody can ever describe to you, no more than they can tell you how to ride a bicycle, or nobody can tell you what the word hot means. The only way you can know how to ride a bicycle is to get on the bike and start riding, and you fall down a few times. The only way you really understand the word hot is after you've been burned. You really don't understand that word until you've been burned. And it's unfortunate that we cannot communicate beyond that some things have to be experienced. But it's because of that doing things like building a computer are as fun as playing a video game. When you play a video game and you make it to the next level, there's a sense of accomplishment there, which your brain releases the endorphins or the dopamine, which is your reward center, and you want to do that some more. But the difference is that none of that matters. You didn't make any difference in the real world. When you build a computer, you actually did something for real, and it does matter. When you help somebody, something as simple as holding a door open for somebody behind you, and they say thank you, and you say, my pleasure, you're welcome, whatever. That's also a dopamine release. Different levels of dopamine, but it's a reward center, and it's happening in real life. It's not, and I'm not putting down gaming by any means, but some people, it seems, the only sense of accomplishment happens through video games. It doesn't happen in reality. And you should be able to get it from both places. And more importantly, you're getting it from real life interaction than from online interaction. This is part, in my opinion, of the mental illness that many people suffer from. The internet and virtual reality can be very addictive and very harmful to people, and any other kind of drug with those dopamine releases, and keep you coming back for more, and to the point where you're prioritizing that over getting sleep or having a job or maintaining a relationship or getting good grades in school. things in real life that actually matter versus whatever you do online. Once you hit the power button, none of it mattered. None of it mattered. So that's my thoughts on that. Is the Intel meltdown Spectre hype over with now? Well, you know, I think the hype is over with, but the problem isn't. Intel recently released new updates. You might check to see if there's a new BIOS update, if it's something you're worried about. I'm not worried about it myself, and I'm not worried about it for any of my clients. Not aware of anything yet in the wild that has affected it. I'm told there are, what's the word I want to use? There are proofs of concept that it can be done, but I'm not aware of any actual harm being done. When that starts making news, then I'll be more worried about it. But I have other issues that actually exist that I have to deal with versus issues that don't exist. Not yet, anyway. Sometimes people seem so focused on trying to prevent a problem that they ignore the problems they currently have. I don't belong to that school of thought. When is the next drunk tech support? I don't know yet. I have to get together. My sister wants to do it with me, so we'll both get drunk. And she thought there were a lot of opportunities for jokes that I didn't exploit. So she's like, I want to be there next time. I said, great. So it's on the to-do list. I don't know when, though. Carrie, have you heard of Silicon Power SSDs? Silicon Power has been making flash drives for a long time. I've got a few Silicon Power flash drives. I wouldn't be interested in their SSDs. The only SSDs I use are from Samsung or SanDisk. There are people online that'll say you can get a flash drive or an SSD rather about as fast as a Samsung for less money, just a little bit slower. But what they don't talk about is reliability, warranty, and customer support. So when it comes to solid state drives, you will constantly see me use Samsung. And if it's a budget-oriented issue, then I use SanDisk. That's it. When you read the stories online of people that have had solid state drives fail on them, look at who the manufacturers are. Very rarely are they Samsung or SanDisk. I won't name the manufacturers, but you can do your own research and see for yourself on that one. Not all SSDs are the same, and there's a reason why I limit my SSD purchases. With few exceptions, I use SanDisk and Samsung only. I have experimented with Mushkin and AData, and we'll just leave it at that. Intel makes good SSDs too, but they're too expensive. That's why I don't buy them. The Samsung drives are faster and cheaper than the Intel drives. And the Samsung Magician software only comes with Samsung drives. And that software in and of itself makes it worth paying, what is it, up to 10% more on a $150 drive. 10% is $15. That's the difference between a cheap flash drive and a good one. $15? If $15 is that important to you, I don't think you should own a flash drive, an SSD. Stick with a hard drive. Thoughts on cryptocurrency? You know, I don't know what you guys want me to say about cryptocurrency. We know what it is. We know what it does. We know how it affects the sales of graphics cards. And more cryptocurrencies are being created every week. And the demand for graphics cards has no end in sight. I don't think we're going to see anything happen this year. If anything, not positive. When it comes to graphics cards, you might wish you bought one now when you see what the prices are going to be in November. Food for thought. That bubble has not burst. Do you invest in Bitcoin? I have no investments in cryptocurrencies. I don't make that kind of money that I can gamble it away that way. You know, people like to use the word invest. It's more of a gamble. I'm going to go invest in Las Vegas. That's what I'm going to do. Do you invest in Tesla? I wish. No. I wish. Carrie, would two 4 terabyte Samsung 2.5-inch SSDs work in mobile workstations and or gaming laptop that have slots for it? You'd have to contact the laptop manufacturer. Only they could answer that question, or somebody familiar with that specific make and model of laptop. You deserve some granite countertops at this point. Oh, my wife would love granite countertops. Actually, I think she'd be happy with cement countertops. I think we'd both be happy with concrete. One of these days, I got to get the floor replaced first. Would a few solid-state drives and a RAID array work well for a speed increase, or would it still be stuck at SATA speeds? Well, the SATA speeds are going to be the same. If you've got a RAID 0 configuration, then you would have theoretically twice the bandwidth. But how that works in reality, and whether or not you would see a speed increase, would depend on the types of files that you are loading or transferring and the size of those files. So yes, in some instances it's a godsend, in other instances it won't help at all. It just depends on the size and frequencies of the files that you're loading. I can't remember if it was bigger files that worked better and the smaller files that were actually no speed difference. There was a whole article on this I read online. I'm sure a place like Tom's Hardware or just using Google will probably show the results of the tests that they've done using, showing the performance difference of solid state drives in different RAID configurations and what the end results were in the benchmarks, and how the benchmarks differentiated in the types of tests that they were performing and where it did well and where it did poorly. Apart from the USA, where do most of your viewers come from? Apparently England, Canada, and Australia. I think those are the top 4. USA, Canada, England, Australia. Yeah, that's 4. Any live builds? There's always, someone's asking if there's any live builds coming up. There's always live builds coming up, always. Hello from Portugal. What's your thought on us? Portugal's not really mentioned a lot here in the United States. It's certainly not a common thing talked about on television or in the news or even on the internet and media. Unless something is happening politically, we probably don't know anything about it. For me, I am, on my mother's side of the family, a significant part of my DNA or my ancestry is Portuguese. So apart from that personal connection, I don't know much about Portugal other than, watching Anthony Bourdain or some travel show going there. There's a guy on YouTube that does travel videos, and I've seen a little bit that way. They're not as polished, they're more realistic about what it's really like to be there, and I know very little about Portugal. What laptop do you use as your daily driver? I don't. None. The only time I need a laptop would be the few times a year that I do my presentations, and I'll just grab whatever I have available. Sometimes it's a Sony, sometimes it's a Dell. Sony doesn't make laptops anymore. They sold off the Vio division to another manufacturer. I would certainly be happy to use a Lenovo. Actually, because I only need it for the presentation, it doesn't even matter to me what it is. One of the last presentations I didn't even use my laptop. The person that was running the presentation had the laptop out, and she said, let's get your laptop configured. And I said, well, can I just use yours? I'm only going to browse the web on it. If somebody asks a question, I can demonstrate it on the website and whatever on the projector. I don't need my laptop for that. She goes, yeah, you're welcome to use it. So, yeah. If I'm going to recommend you buy a laptop, I would recommend you just stick with a big name brand manufacturer that has good support. Companies like Dell, Acer, Asus, Lenovo. Companies I'd stay away from on a laptop would be HP, Toshiba, and anything AMD based on a laptop generally is going to run hotter and not have as good of a battery life. That's just fact. So I tend to lean towards recommending Intel based laptops for performance and battery life and heat to be, as good as they can be. And they do cost more, but I do believe you get what you pay for. A lot of laptops I see come in that are broken are AMD based. I don't know if it's chipset related. I don't know if it's heat related. I don't know. I don't know if it's just because there's people buy more of them because they're cheaper, so I see more that are broken, or if they're of lesser quality. I don't know. But if I'm going to buy a laptop for myself, I will not buy an AMD based laptop. It's just not optimal. I have no problem building a Ryzen or a Threadripper computer, and I have no problem recommending them. But that's for a desktop. And they do well in that arena. But on the laptop side, AMD is still lagging behind Intel, unfortunately. I have not seen any laptops with the Ryzen processors in them. If they even exist, I've never seen one. So I'm reserving any opinion on that until I have something to derive an opinion from. All right, guys, we're coming up on 3 hours here. I think we're going to wrap this up. Is there going to be more food stuff coming? When I have time, I'm so backed up in tech work right now. I can't imagine yet when I'll have time to do any other cooking stuff, but it'll come around eventually. Things will not be quite as hectic eventually, right? It's got to happen at some point. Any feedback from Camille on her computer? Well, I built a computer with my niece Camille a couple months back, and she had a question for me, but it turned out it was a resolution issue that she resolved on her own. And no news is good news. Usually, if you don't hear anything, it's usually because everything's working. So I have to assume no news is good news, and that the computer's performing well for her. When are you going to do new Ryzen APU? Well, as I've tried to emphasize as often as possible, I'm not like other tech enthusiasts on YouTube. I'm an actual working computer technician. And everything you see me do, whether I'm building a computer, upgrading a computer, or repairing a computer, are real computers belonging to real customers that I'm held accountable, responsible, and liable for any work I do for the life of that computer. If that computer has a problem, in warranty or out, if I do my job right, the customer should be calling me first anytime they have a problem. For years and years and years and years and years. And the problem with these YouTube tech enthusiast channels, which most of them are these people don't have any of that accountability. There's no real world liability on anything they do or say or recommend. So I don't just build computers to get views. I build a computer somebody's ordered. If you want to see a computer built, order it. If you can't afford to order it, then enjoy the benefits of what other people have ordered, and you get what you get. I can't, I don't know how else to explain it. You're getting these videos for free. So it's not like you put in requests to have me build things and I sit on the toilet and crap out parts. It's not how it works. Somebody's got to pay for those parts. And YouTube doesn't pay anywhere near enough to justify me building a computer at my expense. I mean, what makes you think I have the money if you don't have the money? Why would I have it? So that bothers me a lot when people somehow think that parts fall in my lap. I don't know what they think. If I told them to pay me to build a computer, they go, well, I don't have that kind of money. Well, why did you think I did? I don't know. Apparently, everybody makes a lot of money on YouTube but me. I mean, if you believe what everybody's saying, must be nice. Yeah, I'm sure you have more money than me. I'm just going to conclude that without any evidence. Do you suggest AMD parts or stick with Intel? Well, again, I have no problem recommending Ryzen or Threadripper desktops if it meets the customer's needs and budget. Do you recommend running VirtualBox on a desktop? No, I don't. But if you want to, go ahead. I would never recommend it to you, but I would never recommend you not. I don't care what you want on your desktop. Doesn't matter to me. Run whatever you want. Does an ordinary user need to water cool a PC? No, of course not. No. No one needs to water cool a PC. People want to water cool a PC. All right, guys, I think that's going to wrap it up. We've been going just over 3 hours, and I think that's a long enough time for people to watch this later on. And thanks so much for participating. Thanks for all your questions and for joining me this lovely Saturday afternoon. And I will see you all again very soon. I've got a video, I've got to go back to editing, where once again I'm showing the process of cloning a hard drive in a laptop. Seems to be still a lot of follow-up questions. So I'm hoping this will be as clear as possible to avoid more questions that I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. I hopefully will answer all of the things that you guys can think of, because some people have asked me some really bizarre stuff. So that'll be coming up here very soon. But I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go for now. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all again very soon. Until then, bye for now.